Hello and welcome to the Megacast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, upleveling your security and networking capabilities. Thank you so much for joining us on this Megacast event. On today's event, you'll hear from experts at Alkira, KnowBe4, Rapid7, NetEnrich, Gigamon, Progress, and Firemon. We've got an awesome event lined up for you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us on this Megacast. We at Actual Tech Media created the Megacast and EcoCast event series to help IT professionals such as yourselves learn the latest and greatest about innovative enterprise technology solutions that can help to solve your technology challenges. We at Actual Tech Media are all former IT professionals ourselves, and we know how tough it can be in the world of enterprise IT. So we're here to help. We want this to be educational, and we want you to learn a lot about these new solutions that can hopefully help to make your life easier. Now, before we get started, just a few things that you should know about the event. Questions, we want this to be educational again, so use the questions box there in your audience console. I already see many of you saying hello and good morning from across the United States and around the world, so thank you for those messages. I hope everyone out there is keeping warm. I know it's pretty cold these days in the U.S., at least for many portions of the U.S., so take care out there, keep warm, and hopefully you enjoy this event. We also want your technical questions for our dedicated Q&A sessions that we'll be running with each of today's expert presenters. I'll be talking about our best question prize as well, so make sure you get your questions in early, and they will be entered into that prize drawing. We also want this to be a social event. I'll be talking about the hashtag. You can tweet directly from your audience console. Over on Twitter, the hashtag is ATMMegacast. The hashtag will be automatically appended if you tweet from the console. I'll be monitoring Twitter, and I hope to chat with you over there as well at some point during the show or after the event. Resources, we have a number of resources there in your handouts tab. I can call your attention to it that way. We've got URL resources, the web pages that you can bring up in your web browser about each of today's solutions. We also have a few PDF assets that you can download, so make sure that you check out those resources. And then finally, prizes. Some of you may have heard this is a Megacast. We do mega prize announcements on these events. And today we'll be giving out 5 Apple M1 MacBook Airs. These are the brand new Apple M1 chips, super fast, really cool system. So best of luck to everyone out there. We'll also be giving away Amazon $500 gift cards every 30 minutes, really after every presentation on the event. You must be live in attendance to qualify. Winners will be announced during the event, and the prize terms and conditions can be found in the handouts tab. We also have the best question prize. We started this new in 2021 because we want to encourage questions, and this is for an Amazon $50 gift card, but one for each session. So we have on the event today 7 sessions, so that's 7 Amazon $50 gift cards. You still must meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy to qualify. All prize winners must submit it on IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We'll reach out to you after the event to contact you about your prize. All prize winners, of course, have the option to make a donation to a selected charity. I know many public sector companies, organizations out there cannot accept prizes, and through generous donations from prize winners over the years, we have supported the charities that you see there on the screen, and donated thousands of dollars to charity. So if you win a prize and you'd like to donate to charity, we would love to help you do that. Also, on today's event, I want to recognize our friends out there in Texas. Take a moment to recognize the disaster that's really going on out there. I'm originally from Texas, and I know a lot of Actual Tech Media supporters and IT pros on the event, and typically on our events, a lot of folks are from Texas, and I want to just take a moment to recognize that. There's been over 30 deaths, 2 million people are without power, a disaster has been declared, and Actual Tech Media is going to be donating $500 to Texas food banks, and of course we encourage you all to do the same. If you win a prize and you'd like to donate that value to a charity, like those helping to support those in need out there in Texas, we would love to help you do that. So everyone, if you're in Texas or have family in Texas, take care. And then social, we have hashtags, like I said, ATM Megacast. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter. We are at Actual Tech Media, and you can follow me as well, David M. Davis. We post all of our latest and greatest content on LinkedIn and as well our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all of our event replays, and also check out the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. And then LinkedIn is what I think most IT professionals are using these days, so make sure you follow us on LinkedIn as well. Now, before I introduce you to our first expert presenter on the event, I have just a little bit of kind of stage setting content here to talk about, a very quick keynote to talk about the challenges that we're facing in the world of security and networking in most organizations today, and then a few poll questions so that you can kind of see how you stack up with your peers. Hopefully some fun poll questions. Now, I know out there the security and networking struggle is real. You're struggling with malicious attacks, seeing every day, every X number of seconds. I mean, you've seen the statistics. Companies are being hit with these malicious attacks. And unfortunately, if data is stolen, if there's a data breach of some kind, then that data is being posted out on the internet. There's blackmail. There's all sorts of really nasty things happening. At the same time, we have to meet our compliance requirements, with our auditors, with the government, things like that. And so when it comes to security, compliance is very critical. We also have to be prepared for disaster. If there is a massive power outage like we talked about in Texas these days, I know there was a very large data center in Houston that was down this week, and many companies were affected. We need to be prepared for those types of disasters. Or if, unfortunately, if we're hit with ransomware, we need to be able to rapidly restore our data and get it back up and running. And then, in the world of networking and security, there's just a lot of inefficiency and costly and aging tools. I know many companies out there have just a tool sprawl. They have so many different tools, and unfortunately, instead of the tools being helpful, they've become just a burden, and an inefficient and costly burden. So anything that we can do to get more innovative, fewer tools that can really provide us the data that we need and help to prevent security breaches before they happen, and help us to analyze network performance problems before they happen or rapidly if they do. Those are the types of things that we need to be focusing on. And then really just this overwhelming constant complexity, and we see it in all levels of IT. Anything that we can do to make the IT organization more efficient is going to save all of us time and money and kind of make us the superheroes of the IT organization, if you will. And, oh yeah, did I mention ransomware threats? Yeah, that's, of course, the hot topic in the world of security and networking these days, because I've got a few numbers for you here, 3 numbers. The first one is 40 seconds. According to one statistic I saw, that's how often a business is infected with ransomware during 2021, or estimated to be in 2021. Every 40 seconds, a new company is infected with ransomware. The second number here is 20 billion. That's the estimated cost of ransomware damages in 2021. And then finally, 18%. Unfortunately, that's the percentage of those who were surveyed said that their current data protection solution, they felt that it was able to meet the future business challenges. And that's not a very high number, in case you haven't noticed. So a lot of folks out there don't feel that their data protection solutions and security solutions are really up to the challenge. And I think that's why this is an opportune event for hopefully everyone out there to learn about these new innovative security and networking solutions. You'll hear about 7 of the hottest solutions on the market today on this Megacast. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter, just a few poll questions I want to get your feedback on. And the first one is, are you using any SaaS security offerings. And I'll share the results of this with you. I'm curious to find out what you're doing around security. Is it an on-premises solution, or are you actually have a SaaS, security as a service, software as a service offering that you're running in some form of cloud? All right, thank you to everyone who responded to that poll. Looks like 55% say yes, they are using a SaaS security offering of some kind. 30% not right now, or 14% not quite sure. Second question, is IT security harder or easier than it was 5 years ago? I don't want to influence the results on this, but I'm willing to bet that I think I already know the answer on this. All right, let me share the results on this one. And as you can see, it says 82% believe that security is harder today than it was 5 years ago. I would tend to agree with you. Next question, is your organization prepared for a ransomware event? All right, let me share the results on this one as well. And 56% said yes. That's awesome, excellent. 21% said no, not prepared. And another 21% are not sure. And so unfortunately, that's 42% if you add those two together, either not sure or not prepared. Now's the time to get prepared. And then another question here, how has your security and networking budget changed for 2021 as compared to 2020? Has it increased, stayed the same, or decreased for this year? I'll share the results of this. And then just one more poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter. All right, I'm liking what I see on this. Thank you, everyone who responded to that. I think this is a good story to share. The results on this one, 43% say it's increased. Budgets have increased. 45% said they've stayed the same. 11% have decreased. So if you add up increased and stayed the same, that's roughly 88% that have, at least maintained the same or improved budget for security and networking. So that's great with the amount of threats that are coming in. And then final question for you. That is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company, specifically around networking and security? If you're on this event today, budgets have been going well. We need to update our tools. We need to train our people. We need to prepare for the ransomware threats and malicious attacks that we said many of us, unfortunately, 42% are not quite sure that they're ready for. So what's your time frame for doing something? All right, excellent. Thank you so much for all those responses to the polls. We'll have a few other poll questions during the event, and of course, we always appreciate your participation in those. Love to hear your feedback, your comments, your questions, and responses to polls like these. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our first presenter. Welcome, Mr. Roger Grimes, Data-Driven Defense Evangelist at KnowBe4. Roger, great to have you on.
Thanks. Glad to be here, and thanks everyone for attending. Again, my name is Roger Grimes. I'm the Data-Driven Defense Evangelist for KnowBe4. There's a slide coming up there. We're going to talk about passwords, and really it's everything. I'm going to talk about password attacks and defenses and everything I can say in 20 minutes, which is a lot. If you don't know me, I talk fast all the time. I've been doing computer security for 34 years. I've written 12 books and over 1,000 magazine articles on computer security. My last one from Wiley was Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication, where I talked about the 50 ways anybody could hack MFA. I work for KnowBe4. We're the world's largest integrated security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor. But again, today we're just going to talk about password attacks and defenses over the next 20, 25 minutes and what your password policy should be. And I would say that typically when I give this talk, it's usually an hour long. I'm doing it in 20 minutes, but I'm going to give you what I think are the most, the pieces that you really need to know about very quickly. So it's, I think, a good talk if you're here today to hear it. Talk about attacks first. You always hear that passwords are going away, but they're not really going away. I've been hearing that passwords are going away for like 30 years, and they just don't seem to ever go away. We seem to have more passwords than ever. Today, the average person has 3 to 19 passwords that they use to log into on over 170 plus websites. And so that means there's a lot of password reuse between different websites and services that there shouldn't be. And if one of those websites and services gets compromised, the attacker can use your logon credentials to see if they can break into your other possible websites. Lots of different ways they can learn your password. We're going to cover these 7 ways here over the next couple of minutes. But, probably a lot of us know about one of the most common ways of these physical attacks where someone literally sees a password on a Post-it note under a laptop. I always thought that was kind of the most common example of password stolen physically, or someone with a password on a Post-it note, and you think, well, that can never happen, right? It does all the time. I find them under laptops all the time. There's a picture of a real laptop that was in a state government conference area where I was given a presentation. It's a public area where anybody from the public was allowed to go to, and there is the username and password to log into that laptop. I remember saying to one of the city officials, one of the state officials, I was like, that like is a joke, right? That you have a login name and password on a Post-it note on a laptop where anyone can see it. I said, hopefully that's at least a local username and password and not a network username and password. And the guy said, you can keep thinking that if it makes you feel better. But we've all seen those where, reporter will be interviewing some group on TV and you see the password on the whiteboard behind them. I frequently go to hotels and I show up and there's, passwords behind them on the screen. You can be socially engineered out of your password. That's probably the most common way, that someone sends you an email or you're on a website and they say, hey, what's your password? Or, there's been a security problem and we need you to verify whether it's you or not, or something like that. Very common, right? That they can send you text or emails or take you to a fake email portal. Or I like this phishing attack here, this last one on the right here. This is an email claiming to be from KnowBe4, telling someone they have to take their training. But if you look at the domain name, instead of it being knowbefore.com, the domain name is something completely different. And even the display name in the email, I love this, kind of creative. It's knowbe.e4.com. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I doubt at the time KnowBe4 knew to pre-register that misspelled domain of its real domain name. But this is really common. I think social engineering and phishing is responsible for it is for sure the vast majority of attacks, and it ranks from anywhere from about 40% to over 90% of all successful data breaches come because of phishing attacks, either where they steal your logon credentials or they get you to download a Trojan horse program like ransomware or something like that. Sometimes the attackers just guess at your password and what they think it will be. They just take a guess, and some people use poor passwords. Most common password's password, but they'll just find some internet accessible logon prompt and they start guessing. Like here's some examples. Maybe they do it with Outlook for Web Access or Office 365 or Google Gmail or maybe Cisco VPN connection. But essentially, if your connection allows someone to log on with a login name and password from the internet and doesn't require multi-factor MFA or VPN, then they can start doing password guessing attempts against it. Most hackers, of course, use automated tools. There's 4 different tools on the screen. I've used them all before. The one in the lower right is Hydra, and THC Hydra. That is probably the most common password guessing tool that I see used today. So hackers will download that tool. It works on Windows and Linux. You can add a GUI to it. It's a command line program, but you can add this GUI to it, and then you upload your password dictionary, that the words you'll use to start guessing at passwords, and then you point it towards a target server or logon prompt, and it will let you know when it has been successful. Also, a lot of password guessing attacks happen against application programming interfaces. Many large companies, including KnowBe4, have application programming interfaces that are supposed to be for somebody's automated system or script to interface and ask information, get information, and a lot of them even if they don't require logon authentication, will allow it. So someone can check different user login names and passwords against an API. They usually account lockout if it's enabled on a regular login prompt. It's oftentimes not enabled on the API. There's usually not a lot of monitoring going on the API. So the APIs are very popular places for attackers to guess at lots of passwords for lots of people in your company. Acme, which is one of the largest load balancing companies on the internet, said 75% of password spray attacks, which, by the way, they reported 61 billion password spray attacks in over a year and a half alone just against their clients, 61 billion. And they said 75% of those were against APIs. So if you have an API, you should make sure that log-on authentication is enabled, that account lockout's enabled, and that you have security event monitoring enabled on that API, because that's where the attackers are going 75% of the time. And again, there's lots of malware that can guess against passwords, steal passwords, TrickBot will steal passwords, but there's a lot of bots and malware programs that will guess at passwords, like Mote, I don't know if I'm saying that right, or Kabot, but very, very common for these malware programs to break into desktops, to break into DVRs and web cameras and IoT devices and just start guessing, logon names and passwords, admin plus some other thing. A lot of times these built-in default passwords, or you can download those lists all over the internet. You just literally type in default password list, and you'll get 100 documents telling you what the default passwords are for different devices. But these bots will also have, common passwords like password and admin and 12345 and Qwerty 123 and that sort of stuff. And they are very, very popular at successfully guessing people's poor passwords, because the most common password for 30 years is password and things like that. So it's not that hard some of the time. And people oftentimes get compromised because of either hackers guessing at it or these password guessing bots. And right now, password guessing bots literally control tens of millions of devices across the internet that are then put into botnet networks that then attack other people. And then one of the last big types of attacks, I've got a couple more, but this is one of the last big popular attacks, are password hash cracking. This occurs when a hacker breaks in and is able to steal from memory on a disk the hash of a password. Most people know that when you type in your password, like you're at Windows or Linux or Apple and you type in your password of frog or something like that, that the operating system will actually run that plain text password through a cryptographic hashing algorithm. The hashing algorithm changes depending on the operating system that you're in, and then stores that in memory and or on the disk. Like for Windows, for a local login, the password hash of your password is stored on a database is called the Security Accounts Management Database, or SAM. For the Windows Network Active Directory Network, it is stored, the password hashes for all accounts are stored in a file called ntds.dit and all the different domain controllers. The hash types that are used on Windows systems these days are called NT hashes. They've been around since the days of Windows NT 3.51. Windows used to also store automatically the Windows LAN Manager LM hash, which was invented decades ago, but it is disabled by default, and it's not considered a hash anymore. It's considered to be so weak that if someone can find an LM hash, they can break it for any password up to a 16-character password, or at 16-character. A 16-character password in Windows disables the LM hash by default, but the NT hash is there. And NT hashes are considered moderately hard to crack at. Early Linux systems used MD5 and SHA-1. These days, Linux and Apple and stuff will use either SHA-2 or SHA-3 or bcrypt, Bruce Schneier's password hashing tool. And some of them use what's called PBKDF2. Even Windows, for local, if you log into a network, they'll locally store a version of your password hash using PBKDF2. And the PBKDF2 and bcrypt are considered pretty strong hashes. NT is about in the middle. SHA-1 and LM are considered fairly weak. LM is the worst. SHA-1, SHA-2, SHA-3. SHA-1 is considered moderately weak. SHA-2 is considered secure right now. SHA-3 is considered even more secure. But again, the best ones you can have these days in a Windows system is probably NT and PBKDF2, and on a Linux system, SHA-2, SHA-3, or bcrypt. But anyways, you type in your password, it gets stored or transmitted as this password hash. And an attacker, if they can get admin or local admin or root on an operating system, they can usually steal your password hash. And then on like a Windows system, you can just replay that hash. You don't even need to crack it back to the plain text equivalent. You can just replay it and connect to and log on to many other computers and devices and services and things like that. Although on Linux and Apple and stuff like that, they actually need to convert it to the plain text equivalent. And even on a Windows system, the attackers would love to convert it back to a plain text equivalent. So that way they can, if I have your password hash in a Windows system, I can connect to lots of stuff over the network, but I need to have the right access, which is NetBIOS and or Active Directory access. If I converted your password hash back to the plain text equivalent that it represents, then I can do logon prompts and things like that and pick up your email if you don't require MFA or a VPN or something like that. So a lot of attackers are trying these password hash cracking attacks. There's lots of password hash cracking software out there. John the Ripper, or the one I'm showing you on the screen here, is called Optcrack. It's one of the few Windows ones. Not a lot of people use it, but essentially what they do is the attacker uploads a bunch of passwords that have been pre-hashed as their password attack dictionary, and then they import all the stolen password hashes, and then they do a comparison as fast as they can. They do these fast lookups using password hash cracking tables, or rainbow tables is actually an improvement on that because they use this intermediate form that's faster than just comparing hashes. Although the most common password hash cracking tool used today is called Hashcat. It's by far the most popular tool. I do see John the Ripper still used, and people will have these password hash cracking rigs. Like my PC has 3 graphical processing units, GPUs. Graphical processing units are just really fast at of trying to guess at a password and crack it back to its plain text equivalent. But people have all kinds of rigs full of them. I know, like, Kevin Mitnick, our chief hacking officer, he has like a rig with 8 GPUs in it. I know we have a password hash cracking rig at KnowBe4 that has up to 100 of these, and you can buy these things for up to like 375 GPUs, and you can use cloud cluster parallel processing to try to take and guess at these passwords. How fast can they do it? A single password hash cracking rig was able to guess 121 billion password tries a second. So I don't know what your password is, but they can guess at 121 billion different combinations to try to crack your password hash back to your plain text password. The world record for the just a rig that could do it that had many GPUs was 350 billion password tries a second. Essentially what this means is that if you have an 8-character Windows password and the attacker gets the hash of that password, they can crack it in under 2 hours on one of these rigs that are widely available, or in 12 minutes using $25 of cloud processing power. Let me say that again. If you've got an 8-character Windows password and they get a hold of your password hash, they can crack it back to the plain text equivalent in under 2 hours, maybe even only 12 minutes. So what they've determined is that if you want to prevent your password hash from being cracked back to its plain text equivalent, you need to have at least a 16-character NT password to get any safety. Publicly, we don't know anyone that's cracked anything, I think, over 11 or 12 characters, but it's considered that you need a 16-character password or passphrase to withstand a sustained password hash cracking attack. And maybe the world's governments and the NSA and China and Russia already have rigs that can crack 16-character passwords, but we don't know about it. But just know you need a fairly long and complex password if you're trying to prevent password hash cracking. The defense to that is prevent your hashes from being stolen in the first place. Using a long and complex password can prevent successful cracking of your hash back to the plain text equivalent. But in order for them to get that hash, they usually had to be in on your machine or network as admin, domain admin, or root or something like that. It's essentially game over. They could just, instead of trying to crack your password hash, they could just keylog you or put it in a backdoor Trojan or just steal your session access control token. I mean, once they've got your hash, it is pretty much game over in most of the scenarios anyways. Although you can turn on tools that try to prevent these password hash cracking and pass the hash attacks from being used. You want to use antivirus and endpoint detection response software to prevent them from using the tools like Hashcat or Mimikatz or Wince or something like that from getting and stealing your hashes in the first place. You certainly want, if you find and detect those hacker tools in your network, it's a problem. But you want to check, and also like Microsoft and other vendors have their own solutions like protected LSAS and RDP admin and admin protected mode that try to prevent pass the hash attacks from happening in the first place. But attackers can also there's literally tens of billions of login names and passwords out there on the internet and the dark web. And if you've been on the internet for more than a few years, there's a good chance your login names and passwords, at least from previous websites, can be out there in the internet, and attackers can buy it or just get it. You should make sure that your login names and passwords aren't out there on the internet. You can go to Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned website and type in an email address and see if your email address and passwords have been reported as having been compromised before. And the first example on the left, I put in my rogerg@knowbefore.com. It says, nope, never been found out there. I put in my long-term 35-year used personal email address, roger@banner@cs.com, and oh my God, you've been compromised, 11 times. And let me say, none of those times were anything I did. It was in hackers. If you go look in the data of what was, of how the passwords are compromised, it was stolen from Facebook, stolen from Twitter, stolen from Adobe.com. They weren't even mistakes I made. It was other websites that got compromised. And if you don't change your password, guess what? When the bad guys look up and find your passwords on one of these password dumping sites on the internet, it could be game over for you. If you want to, you can also download our password exposure test at our KnowBefore resource site, or password exposure test. That'll allow you to check to see if any of your company's employees and coworkers' login names and passwords are out there on the internet, and if they're using weak passwords, they could easily be guessed on your network. That's a really cool tool, free tool anyone can download and use. But sometimes getting someone's password as easy as just asking for it. I've been on several projects where we literally just asked people, random people on the street. One time we offered a free pen that was a $2 pen. Another time we offered a big chocolate bar that was about $2, and we asked people, hey, what's your password? Random people on the street, and how many people told us that? You'd be surprised, but it was around 40%. And if you don't believe me, just go look at this Jimmy Kimmel. Put in Jimmy Kimmel password video and watch these complete strangers tell somebody with a microphone and camera what their passwords are. So out of all these types of attacks, what do I say? What should your password policy be? First of all, realize that most hacker attacks do not care about your password policy. They don't care whether your password is long or short, and that password policy only stops authentication attacks, which are just one type of hacker attack. But if you don't patch your software, they don't care about what your password is. They'll just break into your software. But if you're worried about, okay, well, what should my policy be? Well, first realize that the vast majority of the password the password attacks that we talked about are not impacted by strong passwords at all. If I social engineer you out of your password, I don't care if it's long or short. I just ask you for it. If I steal it, or something like that, I don't care what your password is. I just steal it. But the two that could be impacted by having a strong or complex password is password guessing and cracking. So the vast majority of password attacks, those are like 95 to 99% of password attacks, don't care what your password is, but password guessing does. If you want to prevent password guessing, you don't want your password to be an easily guessable password. Password hash cracking, well, if you're worried about that, you really do have to have a long and complex password, at least 16 characters long. But with password hash cracking, they're already usually in as admin and domain admin in your environment. It's kind of game over already. So really, password policies really are only made to stop password guessing. And so just remember that. And if you can use Mfa Multi-Factor Authentication, that's a great thing to use, because you can't have your password stolen or phished if you don't have a password. The problem with that is MFA is not on all websites and services. As a matter of fact, the most popular MFA solutions only work on less than 2% of all websites and services. And of course, I've made a career lately out of telling people how to hack their favorite MFA solution. I can hack any MFA solution 3 to 5 ways, many of them over 11 ways. There's some free downloads and white papers and things like that if you're interested in learning about that. And you can always buy my book that covers over 50 ways. But what are my password policy recommendations? Again, use MFA when and where you can, because if you don't have a password, it can't be hacked. But you want to make sure that if someone has MFA, that they know how it can be hacked, educate them to be aware of those types of attacks and how they can be attacked. If you can't use MFA, if you can use a password manager program, that's good. That way you can use a long and complex password that's different for each and every website. If you can't use a password manager, to stop password guessing, you want at least an 8-character password with some complexity. You don't want the password to be password 123 or QWERTY 123 or password 2 or whatever. To stop password guessing, you want at least an 8-character password with some complexity in it. If you're worried about password hash cracking attacks, I'm not, but if you are, then you need a 16-character or longer passphrase with some type of complexity in it to stop password hash crackers that are guessing 121 billion times a second. Make sure you enable account lockout wherever you can, including on your APIs. Don't reuse any passwords, no matter what their size, between any different website and service. Don't use easily guessable website or easily guessable passwords. change your passwords at least once a year. That way, if they get stolen, at least they're not usable forever. And again, at KnowBe4, we're big believers in providing training. You should train your employees at least once a month and do simulated phishing tests at least once a month. And if you do that, you'll keep the number of people that will click on a phishing test, which is the most common way people get compromised, below from 38% down to less than 5% after they've been trained for a year. With that said, I know I probably went over a little bit there, but we got some. We've got to have some Q&A or questions. I hope we do. But with that said, I'll kind of shut up for a second. What questions do we have? Did we get any questions?
Absolutely, Roger. I think that's an understatement. We have, let's see, over 30 questions for you, and not enough time to answer them, but let's see, we can do our best. So you talked about password managers. You recommend them, and they are effective. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, if someone emails me at rogerg@knowbe4.com, I'll send you an article I wrote on this. There are some risks with password managers, but I think the benefits highly outweigh the risk.
Okay, excellent. And then there's a couple questions here around, specifically using end user training for security awareness. Obviously, I mean, KnowBe4 recommends it, but what sort of difference does it really make?
Yeah, I mean, so significant. I mean, the whole reason I'd worked at Microsoft for almost 15 years, 12 years full-time employees, and I went to KnowBe4 because their training works so effectively. Like I was doing multi-factor authentication and smart cards and all these advanced things, and all my customers were still being compromised because of social engineering and unpatched software. The training that you give your employees is no doubt in my mind, the best way to decrease risk in any environment.
Excellent. Excellent. I know at Actual Tech Media here, we are KnowBe4 customers as well. I've used the training myself. So great resource. Another question, I know you've talked a lot and spoke about this, quantum computing. Do you see quantum computing being used to crack passwords or break passwords in the future?
Actually, that's a great question. So quantum computers aren't that intense about passwords. I mean, in the way that passwords work. I mean, they don't crack it like public key encryption, like they will public key encryption right away. But it does have the protectiveness of any hash. So whatever your password is, essentially someone's doing password hash cracking. A quantum computer, when they get sufficient qubits, quantum bits, they'll be able to crack the hashes twice as fast. So that's certainly something to be worried about. But it's not like public key encryption where they're going to crack it in 1 second. But it does decrease the password hash effectiveness about in half.
Interesting. Okay. Another question. I know you've written about this, multi-factor authentication. If multi-factor authentication can be cracked, then kind of like we throw our hands up. What are we to do in IT?
Well, security is not binary, right? It's not all on, all off. Your house can be broken into, for sure. But, you try to, put locks on your door and, lock your windows and keep lights. And that's the same thing we're trying to do in computer security. You're not trying to get rid of all risk. You're trying to get rid of the low-hanging fruit. And MFA, even though there are some MFA I don't like. I'm not a big fan of SMS-based authentication. I'm not a big fan of biometrics, single-factor or single-factor hardware keys. But there's lots of good MFA out there. And, most MFA is going to be better and make you safer than using a password alone.
Excellent. For everyone out there, I just brought up the poll question on the screen. I want to call your attention to what additional information would you like about the KnowBe4 solution? Tons of questions here. Let's see, we're working through them as quickly as we can. I'm sure we won't have time for all of them. Next question, what are some of the worst passwords you've seen out there? I like that.
Yeah, by the way, if we don't get to your question today, email me at rogerg@knowbe4.com, and I promise I'll respond to you. Yeah, the worst, it's funny. I've collected password dumps, the hacking password dumps out there on the internet, and the bad passwords that were bad passwords that people use, like password and Uverti, are still the #1 bad passwords out there today, 30 years later. It's funny. We think we have all these better policies and thoughts, but people are still using really bad passwords overall. And it actually gets boring to look through the password dumps because they are somewhat predictable and haven't really been improved over 30 years. Kind of sad.
Wow, yeah. Julie says, did you take time to breathe during your presentation? A really excellent presentation. Brittany says they use KnowBe4, really helps them educate employees. Chris is asking how often should they change their passwords on services and applications like databases. He said they do it twice a year. Is that overkill or is that too weak?
No, I think that's great. So that's a great question. I think everybody personally should change their passwords at least once a year. But I think about when's the last time I changed my Amazon password, right? It's been a long time. Most websites don't tell you to change it. Corporately, I definitely think you need to do it at least once a year, and I think twice a year is a really good sweet spot. Some people say 45 days, 90 days. The more you do it, the less risk, but then it increases the risk of password pattern reuse and people reusing their passwords. So I think once or twice a year, 3 times a year, I think that's a really good answer, but it's up to the risk profile of each and every company. Just know that as you increase how many times someone has to change it, that it actually increases your risk of password reuse, which is a bigger risk than just doing it 2 or 3 times a year.
Got it. What about MFA? What's the strongest MFA available? Marty is asking.
You probably wouldn't use it, right? Some 5-factor thing. But there are solutions I like. The solutions that I like the best, and they're not any MFA, no single MFA solution is right for any one organization, but the ones I do like, I'm a big fan of FIDO2 multi-factor authentications. I'm not a big fan of FIDO single-factor authentication. Also like phone apps where the information gets pushed to the phone app and you get this push notification to approve the login. I like that. I like time-based, one-time based passwords that are based upon open standards that follow that and have the right encryption key sizes and things like that. So there's a lot. There's more things that I don't like than I like, but there's a lot of good MFA out there.
Excellent. And then probably the final question here we have time for, and that's from Paul. Any suggestions for creating and maintaining a culture of shared security awareness and responsibility with so many staff working remote now?
Yeah, I think that the best thing I try to do is communicate and tell people that, listen, the vast majority of your risk is you being tricked into doing something you shouldn't do, providing your login credentials or running a Trojan horse program. Second biggest risk is unpatched software. You take care of those 2 things, and also don't reuse the same password across multiple websites. Do those 3 things, and our company will probably not get hacked. You will probably not personally get hacked. Just 3 things. You don't got to do the world. You don't got to do 1,000 things. Tell them 3 things. Stop don't be tricked into doing the social engineering thing. Patch your software. Don't reuse your passwords across different websites and services. And if you concentrate on those 3 things, you're going to be pretty safe. Your company's going to be pretty safe.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, Roger. Always a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for showing up.
And Roger has graciously provided his email address there on the screen. If you have more questions that we didn't have time for, we'll be routing the questions that came in over to the experts at KnowBe4. And with that, it's time for our first prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Sean Irvin from South Carolina. Congratulations. And our first grand prize for a MacBook M1, brand new model MacBook, is going to Jeff Pryor from Utah. Congratulations to Jeff Pryor from Utah. All right, and with that, it's now time for our next presentation on the Megacast. I'm excited to introduce Mfa Multi-Factor, Technical Marketing Manager at Alkira. Mfa, are you there?
Hey, David. Yes, I'm here and pretty excited to be back at this event. So,
always great to have you. Take it away.
Cool. Thank you very much. So, yeah, cool. My name is Mfa Multi-Factor, and as David said, I lead the technical marketing initiatives at Alkira. And pretty excited to be back and talking about the cloud and the network security. So basically, we're going to talk about 3 things. So first of all, as the enterprises embraces cloud, the challenges that they face from a security perspective, and what are the options that they have available in order to implement the cloud, making sure that the security is taken care of, and then how there are some limitations in those available options, and how Alkira Network Cloud provides you a full, complete solution that takes care of no blind spots in the cloud and will make sure that you have a solid security as you embrace the cloud. Before we go into and do a deep dive of the security aspects of the things, I just want to do a quick introduction of the Alkira. So we were founded in May 2018. So as enterprises were embracing cloud, because the business demanded that, because cloud provides more agility on demand, and it was something that is needed for the business. But at the same time, what we noticed that there are still many challenges in terms of embracing cloud from a network perspective, from a security perspective, because your connectivity patterns were changing. Now you are going out from your private connectivity network to the public connectivity network, and you want to make sure that you embrace in a manner where it provides you an enterprise-grade solution, and the solutions were missing from the market. So our founders basically decided to make sure that we want to make this connectivity, this transition to cloud easier for the enterprises, and we want to solve a problem that would provide them with an enterprise-grade solution, and thus at the same time, it's simple to use and manage. This idea was taken very well by the VC community, and we got immediately funded by the Tier 1 VCs. We got $76 million across Series A and Series B rounds. So our VCs are Sequoia Capital, Kleiner Perkins, Google Ventures, and Coke Disruptive Technologies. From the get-go, we wanted to make sure that we are coming up with a solution that resonates with the customers, that solves the real customer problem. We didn't want to come with a solution that is technically really cool and awesome, but does not have a real application. So from the get-go, from the initial development, we were working with our customers, with the friendly customers. And at the time of the launch, even with our MVP product, we had a couple of customers who were actually using us for their production use cases. And then we launched in April 2020, and since then we have been seeing great traction from the customers, and we have been helping out more and more customers to embrace this cloud transition. Now, in terms of the challenges that I was talking about, there are quite a few challenges when you are trying to embrace cloud. That vary from cost, like slowness, complexity, scalability, and all that. But today we're going to focus on the security aspect of the thing. So if you look at the traditional network designs, everything was mainly centralized. All the applications, all the development were actually centralized in the data center. So what you can do is you can get away with the castle and moat type of a topology where you are protecting and you are securing your data center to make sure that it's fully secure and all the applications were secured behind that. And it worked really well when we just had the data center. But as the workloads are moving, as your applications are moving from the private data centers into the public cloud, into the SaaS applications, now you want to make sure that your point of connectivity into your corporate network is going beyond your private network. It's going into the internet. And you want to make sure wherever those connection points are, you are making sure that there are no blind spots, there are no open vulnerabilities that the attackers can exploit. So from a network, whatever cloud that you're embracing and whatever type of applications that you are implementing in your network, you want to make sure that it's fully secure and it provides you the enterprise consistent security that you are used to, from the on-prem perspective. If I look at the pictorial view of the challenge that I talked about from a security perspective, if you look at the network of today, what we see is we have the network, we have the remote user connected to it, we have the guest users, we have the remote site data centers, and then you have the cloud connected to it along with the SaaS application. Okay, so basically what happens is with all those different types of connections coming into it, the traffic patterns are from anywhere to anywhere. These remote users can talk to the cloud application. These remote users can talk to the data centers. Your guest users can talk to any of those applications that they are allowed to talk to each other. So from a security engineer perspective, it's a nightmare. He doesn't know from where to implement those security, how to provide a consistent way of implementing security from on-prem or when the traffic is going into the cloud. In terms of the options, he has three different options available at hand. One, let's suppose we can do it the co-location manner, where you can go with a co-location provider like the Equinix, Digital Reality, where you basically get a cage, you you deploy your network infrastructure, you deploy your firewall security, you extend the direct connect or the express route into the cloud. And then if you want to expand into other regions, you do the same thing like in another region. This is great like from an architecture perspective because now you have these co-locations closer to the cloud. You implement your security profiles and all that, and it looks good and consistent from both on-prem and cloud perspective. But what it takes is it takes time. Like from a business perspective, it does not move at the pace with which the business wants you to move because getting the cage, getting the direct connect or the private connectivity into the cloud, implementing or installing the router and the security takes time. It's super costly as well because these co-location does not come for cheap, and then you need the resources to actually deploy, test, and maintain those stuff. So for big enterprises, it may work where they have the resources, they have the teams to do it. But for a small, medium-sized organization or any big enterprise that wants to keep their business or their operations lean, this is not a scalable solution. The next option is the cloud transit. What it is leveraging cloud-native constructs in order to extend your connectivity securely into the cloud. These transit architecture can be based on the transit gateways. In case of AWS, it could be based on virtual WAN in case of Azure, or Google NCC when it comes to the GCP. What it does is you connect into some of the transit architecture, the native construct that the cloud provides. You reroute the traffic towards the firewall security appliance, and you get the security done, and then you forward the traffic to the cloud workloads that you have. The problem with this approach is that for every cloud, you need the expertise to actually develop that kind of an architecture. For any given region, if you have multiple clouds, you are replicating like two different types of network or two different type of architectures for each of the clouds. And then at the same time, it comes with the underlying limitation that the cloud offers. So it would work, but I would still think that it would be a compromise. It's not a complete solution. It has redundancy and it has the limitation that you have to work around with the cloud native solution. The third approach, which I believe is the one that we should be looking at, because that approach is offered as a service. It's an on-demand. It works like a cloud. It behaves like a cloud. Like for instance, in this case, and Alkira follows the model as well, where we have the cloud exchange point deployed closest to the user. The user can come and connect to any region within the cloud. And then at those point of presence that is closest to the user and the application, you can implement security. That security is implemented consistently across the board, across any cloud. So today in this Megacast, we're going to talk about and focus on security. But on top of this, the connectivity is super critical as well, because if you are only offering security as a service in this type of an architecture, you still run into challenges about the connectivity, how you connect into the cloud, like how you basically make your connectivity inside the cloud easy. So what we are offering is as a service component and offering security where you can have a consistent and standardized way of providing security into the cloud. But at the same time, it also simplifies the connectivity. So from a business perspective, the network and the security team can move with the pace at which the business demands them to move. Now, next, before we deep dive into the security use cases, I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the architecture as a whole that Alkira offers to the enterprises. So what you see in the middle are the cloud exchange points. These cloud exchange points are distributed globally. The point is that these cloud exchange point needs to be closest to the user and the application. So for instance, if you have a workload in the East Coast, you can connect your cloud workloads to the East Coast. You have the users in the West Coast. So you can basically deploy and install the cloud exchange point, one in the East Coast and one in the West Coast. As you spin it up through our point-and-click design canvas, they would automatically connect to each other. They'll exchange the route information. So essentially what you got is a cloud backbone by a simple click of a button. This sounds crazy, but I think once you, after this presentation, I'll request if you guys want to know more, look at the demo, because seeing is believing. Once you see it, you'll be amazed at how easy it is to bring up those exchange points. These are virtual exchange points. And again, if you can just bring it up as you are bringing up the VM in an Amazon console or Azure console. Once you have the backbone connected, that means you have solved the connectivity problem, like from one region to another region. Now you can go to the services marketplace in the portal. You can deploy any kind of firewall services from the services portal and implement security on these exchange points. So now any traffic that is coming from your remote site, whether it's coming from SD-WAN, whether it's coming from a remote user, whether it's coming from a direct connect, you can implement your security policies while they go towards the cloud. The same can happen for all the traffic that is coming from cloud to the users or cloud to cloud. So you have one consistent way of implementing policies, the security policies, whether the traffic is going from on-prem to on-prem, on-prem to cloud, on-prem to internet, or cloud to internet. These redirection actually happens through an intent-based policy architecture. It's a very simple policy framework where you define your source and destination and just tell that, okay, this type of traffic needs to go through the firewall. End-to-end segmentation is restored from any connector going to any cloud workloads or any on-prem connector. It provides you a complete day two operations where you have the monitoring visibility captured, and it's a one unified interface that can provide you all the monitoring capabilities, whether it's for on-prem or the cloud. And then we provide chargeback billing like the cloud does, where you can basically assign these connectors that are connecting into Exchange Point to different business units, and you can do a itemized chargeback billing back to the business units. Now the next use case that we want to talk about is the segmentation. It's a pretty basic use case or the pretty basic concept that we all use to from a security perspective. We all love and like to isolate the traffic because that's the building block of the network security, that you isolate different types of traffic into VLANs and WRFs. So if we look at it in the old days when we just had the data center and the cloud was not there, we used to have different types of traffic tagged with different WRFs, and those WRFs goes into the firewall, and then we keep them isolated, and within the WRF we implement policies to protect our traffic. Now, as the enterprises started to embrace cloud, what they saw that in the cloud, the options that were available were the security groups and the ACL. So it's not the consistent way of like from an architecture perspective, it was different, something different what you're doing on-prem versus what you're doing in the cloud. But over time, what we saw that the firewall vendor came up with the firewall appliances. Now you can deploy the firewall appliances inside the cloud. But at the same time, those firewall appliances are deployed within the cloud, and it has to work around with the cloud-native constructs. And it has to basically work around with the limitation that the cloud offers. One of the limitations with the cloud is the segmentation, because it's not natively supported inside the cloud. You have to build parallel networks and then do some kind of route leaking on the on-prem side to make sure that you are isolating the traffic the same way that you're used to on-prem through some workarounds. When we were building the solution, we realized the problem, that the cloud has a problem to implement segmentation. And we were, as I said, that we were working closely with the customer because we wanted to make sure that we understand the customer requirement. So from the get-go, if you spin up any connector within the Alkira, like whether it's an on-prem connector like an SD-WAN or the remote side, or any internet connector or the cloud workload, the building block of any connector is the segment. So you tag that connector with the segment. So from the get-go, you can completely isolate the traffic, whether it's a cloud traffic, whether it's going towards the on-prem, whether it's going to the internet. By default, the two segments are not allowed to talk to each other. There are some advanced features like resource sharing where you could share some resource when you define it explicitly between the segments, but by default, they are completely isolated. Within this segment, we have the concept of groups, which is kind of a micro-segmentation. The use case is that within the same segment, if it's a corporate segment, we have the traffic coming from on-prem going towards the cloud and the internet. Now, the enterprise can easily want a particular type of a policy when the traffic is coming from on-prem to internet versus what the policy that they want for the traffic that is coming from cloud towards the internet. So the group construct helps us make our policy simpler, where you could define different types of group based on the type of the connector and implement the policies accordingly, and thus provide a level of, like, another layer of segmentation within each segment, which we call the micro-segmentation. This architecture actually flows really well with the firewall architecture as well, because if you look into the firewall, if you talk about the segment actually maps to a virtual router, like in the firewall construct. And then within the segment, if you have these groups, they can map to an individual zones within the firewall. So it cleanly and seamlessly aligns with the firewall architecture. It can implement segmentation within the cloud. It can provide you a same consistent way of implementing security across the board, whether it's on-prem, whether it's cloud, and all that. And everything is managed, deployed, and installed through an Alkira intent-based policy framework, which is like very intuitive, and you can do it through a point-and-click manner. So what it provides you, an enterprise-grade security multi-cloud posture for your enterprise. The next, we talk about the secure SaaS and internet access. So in addition to the public cloud adoption, we are seeing more and more enterprises using SaaS applications like Microsoft Office 365, like Salesforce, and other SaaS applications that they have been using. If you look at the SaaS architecture, the SaaS architecture is more like a distributed architecture. It's based on the CDN. They have their POPs closest to the user. And in order to provide the optimal access into the SaaS, what the demand is that the user needs to exit out and access the application as soon as possible. So what enterprise need to do is now, in this case, enterprise cannot afford to take your traffic from the on-prem sites like SD-WAN or remote sites all the way up to the data center to provide security and then exit out to the SaaS application. What they want is a local breakout, like a dedicated internet access. The challenge with that is once you provide that kind of an architecture, where do you provide security? Like, would you deploy a firewall at each site? That would be too costly. So if you look at it, like if any of the enterprise is embracing Alkira, if you look at it, our architecture, this is based on this distributed CXP alliance and like works very well with the SaaS architecture, because our architecture is also distributed. It provides distributed aggregation points for the users to terminate into any region. So all the users that can terminate to the closest CXP region, that CXP region exists very close to the SaaS application or the SaaS CDN in that region, and you can provide and enforce the security at that cloud exchange point that the Alkira, where the user are terminating into Alkira and provide the security. So thus, what you are getting out of it is an optimal access into the SaaS, plus at the same time in these exchange points, you can build the security, and again, you have the same consistent architecture from a security perspective, and thus still providing you an optimal access into the SaaS. The next use case is the cloud DMZ use case. So again, going back to like how we used to deploy the DMZ, this DMZ used to be in the data center. It would be a completely different section of the network where we had the firewalls protecting the workloads inside the DMZ and any traffic that is coming from the internet, because in this case, the traffic is not initiated from inside. In this case, like it would be a public website that we are hosting. We are actually attracting traffic coming from the outside into our enterprise. So in this case, as the workloads start to move into the cloud, again, different clouds has different solutions for DMZ. They provide different way of attracting the traffic from the outside into the inside. So again, you again get into the same problem where if you have these public-facing application in data center in different clouds, you have inconsistent architecture for your DMZs as well. You have to learn each cloud, like data centers, yes, we all know how to do it, but for the cloud, you have to learn each cloud how to offer that DMZ type of service securely. And again, this functionality is not same across different clouds. So again, you may run into some limited functionality in one cloud versus the other when you're hosting the DMZ application. With our internet-facing application functionality, we offer a same consistent way of offering DMZ services, and these DMZ services can be hosted anywhere in your network. It could be in any cloud, it could be in your data center, but the way it will be accessed and the way you will provide security, it's the same consistent way of providing the security. We will provide the public IP address. We will help you basically update the DNS records and provide the NAT services. The traffic from the internet can hit the CXP. We can punt it through, again, the same intuitive intent-based policy framework into the firewall, provides the necessary security, and whatever ports that are allowed can be forwarded into the private workloads where the actual application is hosted, whether it's in the cloud or it's in the data center. The next use case is the zero trust network access. So with the pandemic, what we have seen is exponential rise of remote users, right? Now, again, traditionally, it's also a centralized way of connecting the remote users. People used to have the remote access concentrators sitting in the data center. And when you are looking to access the SaaS application, you still have to basically take the traffic all the way up to the data center, then provide access into the SaaS application, thus adding unnecessary latency in the path. And from a performance perspective, it negatively affects the performance of this application. Even with the Zero Trust Network Access, we provide a distributed way of connecting the remote users into our CXP. All the CXPs that you are seeing, they can be, we can initiate a remote access concentrator or a connector and like on all the CXPs. When the user tries to authenticate into the remote access connector, based on the DNS, based on the region, we will pick the closest CXP. We will terminate that remote users to the closest CXP, and thus making sure that the traffic don't have to unnecessarily backhaul across regions before it hits the actual application. So it will basically automatically terminate it natively onto the closest CXP. These remote access connectors can be divided into different segments. Like, for instance, you have your own internal network VPN that you want to keep it in segment 1. Your partners can be in other segments, segment 2 and segment 3, and they can be completely isolated. Within the segments, we follow the same convention where you can have users divided into different groups, and you can have micro-segmentation, and you can have group-based policy for these remote users as well. Again, the same consistent way of implementing the policy, whether it's an actual on-prem connector or a remote access user. This is a completely decentralized architecture where the users will be terminated into these regional exchange points. It's a horizontally scalable design. As you add more users, we can add more of these remote access connectors. It can auto-scale, like as your need and demand increases during a particular time. It can auto-scale on demand. It provides segmentation, which we talked about. And then it's managed through the same centralized Kira portal. Like, you don't have to get an additional portal to manage these remote users. It's under one roof, and you can manage your remote user from the same Alkira Cloud portal. The next one is the zero-touch auto-scaling of the network services, which in this case, we are focusing on the security services. So if you look at the cloud, the nature by nature cloud is on demand. You basically spin up services, you spin up VMs when and where you needed it. And if you don't need it, you just shut them down. But if you look at the network construct, it's still pretty static, even in the cloud. When you are setting up your cloud network, you basically set up for your peak capacity. Like, for instance, if you're building some gateway or you're leveraging transit gateway, you need to make sure that you have built your network inside the cloud pretty statically and build for the peak capacity. There is no concept of auto scaling. But when we were building this solution, as I talked about, that we wanted to build like a cloud and we wanted to behave like a cloud. So any construct that we have within our portal needs to be on demand. It needs to be able to auto scale. Like, for instance, if you talk about firewalls, right? If let's suppose during the day from 9 to 5, I have a need of spinning up 8 different firewall appliances like inside the portal. I can spin it up on the day, but after 5, when my utilization goes down, the Alkira should be able to automatically spin down those versions, because after 5 I don't need those VMs or that many VMs, because if I keep them up and running, since it's on demand, I am basically paying it for every hour. I'm unnecessarily wasting money while I don't need them after the peak hours. So what we support is auto scale up and down of these network resources. Whenever we see that, okay, the utilization is going up, it could dynamically spin up more appliances, and when the utilization is going down, we can basically bring them down, auto scale down the firewall version. So basically, and in terms of forwarding the traffic, we have intelligent hashing, because any traffic that is coming in, and if there are multiple firewalls, we know that from a networking perspective, it becomes a challenge, because they would like to maintain the state. So we want to make sure that we always pick the same firewall for a particular flow. So there is some intelligent hashing mechanism that forwards the traffic to the same firewall always for the given flow. So it provides you an efficient utilization of your resources, and at the same time making sure that your network is built to take care of the peak capacity. Lastly is the multi-cloud network visibility. The reason why I kept it here is we want to make sure that when you are connecting all the different types of network, that there are no blind spots in your network. So considering that with a Alkira portal, you have all the different components of the network connecting into your environment, you want one single unified way of looking into it, monitoring into it. So with Alkira portal, we provide one unified way of monitoring the environment, whether it's the cloud, whether it's the on-prem, whether it's the remote user. So making sure that there are no blind spots in your network. And then lastly, I know we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about and primarily focusing on security. When it comes to Alkira, there is this connectivity aspect, there is the cloud governance and monitoring aspects of it. We truly think that we are making this cloud, embracing cloud very, very easy from a customer perspective. We are actually solving all the roadblocks that the enterprises sees from a networking and security perspective, and they embrace the cloud. And I think the best value that the customers see is actually looking at the solution after looking at the solution, because like some of the stuff that we talked about, it's too good to be true. And when the customers see the actual demo, they could see the value and the ease that we can bring into this cloud onboarding. Like one of the examples that I want to give about one of our customers is they have been looking to embrace Azure, and they wanted to go into multi-cloud. It's been 6 months that they were trying to standardize the solution. After they embraced Alkira, they were able to spin that up in less than a week. So basically, I think I highly encourage that if you guys want to schedule a demo, because the demo will basically show the ease of use, how you can onboard, and we can talk through the actual hypothetical scenario where you can have multiple clouds, multiple on-prem connectors going through the firewall and everything. And in a matter of 40 to 45 minutes, we can bring all that network in, like up and running during that demo. So highly encourage that if you want to know more about it, schedule a demo, because that's where you'll see the real power of the solution. So with that, David, I think that's all I had.
Excellent presentation. Really love what you guys are doing at Alkira. Actually love the architectural diagrams there as well. You got some good feedback on those, explaining exactly how this solution works. I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there. We'll leave up while we take a couple of questions that says, what additional information would you like about the Alkira solution? And I encourage you to fill that out, multi-select question. And as Mfa said, you can also go to alkira.com/demo. So let's see, first question I saw that came in, and there are many. many of them. We won't have time for all of them. Simon is asking, what cloud service providers does this work with, and does it work better with one cloud platform over another?
That's a great question, David. So currently, we support Azure, GCP, and AWS. And the beauty of the solution is that there's not a preference for a cloud provider. So the value that we bring to the table is we provide the seamless, same consistent way of onboarding any of the clouds. So any onboarding, like if you're onboarding AWS and Azure, it's the same way of onboarding. All the complexity on a per cloud basis has been abstracted from the user, and that's where they see the for them onboarding AWS or Azure would be same as if they are using the Alkira platform. So yeah, that's a great question, and that's the exact value that we are bringing to the table, that you do not need two sets of expertise to onboard two different clouds.
Excellent. And then there's another question around what sort of visibility can be gained into the traffic that's flowing across this?
Okay, yeah. So from a visibility perspective, there are multiple aspects of the visibility. First of all, we have the diagnostics. We have the flow data, like what's flowing into the environment. And the third one is the alerts and alarms that you see. So from a diagnostic perspective, you could go to any of the connectors. You could do the basic ping testing. Like we are also bringing up the TCP DOM, the health check, and all that about the connectors. So you could do the diagnostic troubleshooting. From a visibility perspective, you have the flows, like the kind of the data that is going through it, the routes that we are learning from different cloud providers or the on-prem connectors. And then from the alerts and alarm perspective, if something goes down, if you want to punt that alert to your centralized management system, those are also there, like in the portal. So those are the level of the monitoring and the visibility you get.
Excellent. And then, so when it comes to security, can I create a security policy and just apply that to all the cloud providers or endpoints?
Yes. So that's where the concept, we talked about the micro-segmentation, right? So you could group them, all the cloud providers, under the same group. There's this intent-based policy framework where you define that, okay, whenever the traffic is coming from on-prem groups going towards the cloud group, that can have one cloud, multiple clouds, and all that, implement this type of a policy. So yes, with a single click, you can apply it across all clouds.
Very nice. I like that. All right. Well, Ms. I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our Q&A session, but it's been great having you on the event. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, David. Thanks.
And hopefully you can get back to many of these questions here electronically, because there's a lot of great questions. So thank you to Mfa, and thank you to Alkira for supporting the event. Check out alkira.com/demo, or check that you'd like a demo there on the form, and the folks at Alkira will get back to you. And with that, it's time for our next prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Cody Bush from North Carolina, and Dominique Green from Arizona is the winner of our second MacBook M1 laptop. Congratulations. And with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome Michael McKinley, Security Solutions Engineer at Rapid7. Michael, take it away.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So I guess we will just go ahead and jump right into it. So today what we're going to be talking about is up-leveling your security and networking capabilities. This is a great topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart in normal times. But just given the state of the world lately, I mean, we're experiencing, not only the need to continue to up-level these security capabilities, but in addition, we're also needing to do that in a way where we're being asked to do more with less. A lot of the folks in the cybersecurity industry come from the veteran community, myself being a former Marine. This ask is not new to me. This is what I've been doing for a long time now, since I was 18 years old. But specifically what we're being asked to do is we need more visibility. We need, visibility into new challenges that we really haven't faced before, by and large, just, when we're talking about folks working as security professionals or IT professionals across a number of different verticals. So what we're being asked to do is secure a remote workforce A lot of us have never been asked to do that before. And we're also being asked to secure these SaaS and cloud solutions mid-migration. It's almost like building the plane while we're flying it. And so these newer technologies, if I've been working in networks, got my, Cisco certs and have been going that route for my whole career, it can be a little bit of a daunting task to look at adjusting to, this entire new infrastructure as a service model where, there's going to be certain components like my S3 buckets that don't even have an IP address I can scan. And what do I do with that? And so at Rapid7, we've really made it our goal in large part to support teams who are being asked to do these things with smaller budget, with less headcount. And the way that we're doing that is we're doing that by taking an approach that really encompasses a suite of solutions. And that suite of solutions is going to help us identify the areas of weakness that we need help on the front end, as well as help us respond to events on, as they're ongoing. So without further ado, jumping into the Rapid7 platform. The Rapid7 Insight platform, the first place we're going to start is with visibility, because if you can't see it, you can't secure it. And that's where we're talking about vulnerability management and application security. We need to be able to see where the holes are. The equivalent I always think about here is this is the equivalent of having that security guard walking around the building, checking all the locks on the doors, making sure everything looks the way it should. And in certain cases, if it's an important room, walking into that room and making sure that, there's no other way in, or there's no, nothing exposed that shouldn't be. So that's what we're doing there. We start to bridge the gap from just that sort of visibility and to visibility and analytics with a little bit of prevention baked in, and automation when we get to DivvyCloud. And then our detection and response capabilities. So we go from visibility with DivvyCloud, we start looking at some policy enforcement, and then we're looking at how we can detect, respond, and then even automate some of those incident response playbooks through orchestration and automation. And Rapid7 has tools to help with each one of these elements. So moving in, I think we're going to start with vulnerability management. So inside VM, vulnerability management, that's really Rapid7's bread and butter. That's what's helped build the company into what it is today. When we started 20 years ago, that meant scanning, and then once you've scanned your network, you pull in those results, you put them into a spreadsheet, and you get that over to IT for patching, and then you just lather, rinse, repeat. Well, things have gotten more complex as we've moved forward, and there's a lot of challenging questions out there these days. Okay, great. Our old scanning methodology worked just fine when everybody came in the office, but how do we scan, these devices that are not on the corporate network with any regularity? We're transitioning to cloud. How, like the example earlier, how do I scan an S3 bucket? Or what do I do about these cloud services that have components we're responsible for securing, but that don't respond to a traditional vulnerability scan? And that's where Insight VM has really grown and matured with our user base, and gives us the capability to go in and say, okay, for those remote workers, rather than traditional scanning mechanisms, we got the Insight agent. That Insight agent is going to report back and 4 times a day provide updates on vulnerabilities on those remote machines that are not on the corporate network. When it comes to cloud configuration or container assessment, we've got specific tabs built out for each one of those. And we just continue to, iterate on this and include that in Insight VM, so that we can take what the folks who have been working with Insight VM are used to for years, build on it in a way that's intuitive to really bridge the gap and help them make that transition. Now, Insight IDR, this is our detection and response solution. Insight IDR, I was so excited about this particular technology when I got to Rapid7 because I'd come from a SIEM background. And for anybody here who's worked with SIEM, with that, security incident and event management solution in the past, you might be, you might be triggered just from the acronym itself, because traditionally what we found was the way that the SIEM was implemented required a lot of research and then writing a lot of advanced rules to correlate machine behaviors together to logically figure out when we are seeing something that's worth responding to. That also led to a lot of noise. And so analysts were sitting stuck just triaging through a number of alerts and events, trying to get to what mattered. Inside IDR takes a unique approach that is really well suited for our current situation, because from the get-go, what we've been saying is, okay, rather than just looking at what's going on with those machines in the network and treating the edge of the network as the fence, so to speak, that the malicious actors are trying to get into, your users are your biggest perimeter. The perimeter to your network is your users. And so what we've done with Inside IDR, we've leveraged that same agent technology that we're leveraging with Insight VM and able to push that machine data back to Inside IDR. But then in conjunction with that, by tapping into some foundational event sources, we're able to analyze user behavior and actually attribute actions taken on machines to users. What this has done is this allows our clients to leverage those pre-configured rules and catch these potential attacks earlier in the kill chain, respond sooner. And when it comes to incident response, time to response is really the name of the game, because that's where you're able to get in and actually mitigate the cost financially, the cost to reputation, and just the cost to quality of life while you're in the middle of responding to an incident, going through, and then the after action that follows on. So Inside IDR, it provides those capabilities not only in those traditional on-prem environments, but as I mentioned, by leveraging the Insight agent, your remote workforce, we're getting that data in as well. So we're still able to keep tabs on those remote workers from not only a vulnerability standpoint, but from an incident detection response standpoint. We're also able to hook in to your cloud service providers. So, again, if you're making that migration to AWS or to Azure, then we can help with that migration, with that sort of seamless piece of giving you the visibility from Inside IDR, so that you can maintain your security posture throughout that migration. The other piece is we're able to connect with the cloud-hosted apps, like the Google Suite, Office 365, Salesforce, and pull in data there and just ensure we're getting a holistic picture of the key devices, key individuals, as well as those key technologies that your organization is leveraging. So DivvyCloud is really unique because, we're talking about this cloud migration piece. One of the trends we're seeing in cloud migration a lot more, I'd say in the past year, is a multi-cloud migration. What you'll have is you'll have these organizations, and these organizations, what they look at is they look at, okay, cool. What we need is a cloud platform that's going to be great for heavy data analytics. We need a cloud platform that's flexible in terms of working with a few different apps that our company uses that are built on multiple frameworks. And then from an infrastructure standpoint, because, we've been heavily invested with Windows, we're also going to need some back-end services, and we prefer to go, kind of the Windows route with that. And what I just described was, okay, great. So we're looking at GCP, the Google Cloud Platform, AWS, and Azure, and really getting the most out of each platform. But how do you secure an environment like that without having an expert in each? Well, DivvyCloud is going to provide a huge help there. Because with DivvyCloud, you're able to compose these policies and then push those policies out across multiple cloud environments. So, for instance, if you had a policy that said, hey, when we spin up a compute instance, we need to make sure that, port 22 is not open to the world, or, other policies around that, you push that out through DivvyCloud, and it gets pushed out to all three of those cloud providers mentioned earlier, in addition to some other cloud providers that I'm not mentioning, Alibaba being one of them. But at that point, what happens is you push that out, and you can help ensure that policy is pushed out across multiple clouds from a single platform. And in addition, you can help ensure that policy is being enforced through the deployment of bots within DivvyCloud. Now, moving over to Inside Absec. Inside Absec, this really represents a pivot in security over the last 10 years, where attackers found that, okay, the traditional means of exploiting a vulnerability can be kind of tedious sometimes. However, there are these fun new web applications, and there's about 10 really common ways to break into those or to mess with them. You just have to figure out how to do it with each one. So, for a lot of security professionals, they were coming from more of an infrastructure, more of a networking background, and didn't have the, the advantage of coming from a development background or, coming from an application security background. So because of that, what we've tried to do here at Rapid7 is really create and continue to, to build on technology for application security that does not only provide the ability to get in and get effective coverage across multiple frameworks of that applications can be built on, but in addition, we've done that in a way that'll also, just like InsightVM can help you monitor that end-to-end discovery of vulnerability to remediation process and provide you recommendations on what remediations to provide or to implement, Inside Absec has that same functionality. So once we scan an application, we'll get the results in, and those results, they're going to include fewer false positives. We're able to break those down and then pass us over to our developers, along with the ability to, leverage the Inside Absec toolkit, which is just a browser extension that allows you to retest in real time. So you get that recommendation, you go in and you make sure things are secure, and that way it can speed up that process. And again, really try to continue to facilitate a strong relationship in DevSecOps between the developers and between the security team. Now, let's say that, we want to up-level that a step further. And what we want to do is we want to implement this dashed scanning as part of that software development lifecycle. Well, in that case, what we can do is we can integrate. We have direct integrations with Jenkins, Azure DevOps, as well as a few others, and we also have an open REST API we could use to integrate. So at this point, Inside Absec becomes a gate in your build process. So for instance, as code's being committed, as being pushed through, tests are being run, there's a couple of tests that we could look at running. One, if you're using containers to push this code out, we just jump back a few slides to InsightVM. That can be automated as part of that build process as well. So that way, if the container image contains vulnerabilities, we can fail the build to ensure we're not pushing a vulnerable application or vulnerable infrastructure into production. In the same way, if the application comes through and there are high or medium vulnerabilities, so for example, if this new functionality also provides the user with an opportunity to, effectively execute a persistent cross-site script, we could take that and automatically scan, and then based on those results, automatically fail that build as well. Or, ideal scenario that we make it through. Inside Absec does not detect evidence of those vulnerabilities. And as we've made it through, we're good to go, and it just passes that build straight through. So the next time the security team runs a scan with Inside Absec, we're going to have even fewer results get back to those developers because we have pushed security to the left in our secure software development lifecycle and are able to push out secure apps on a more regular cadence. Well, this is all great, but the one thing we haven't spoken about is, okay, these solutions sound fantastic, but in the trifecta of technology, people, and processes, I got my processes pretty well down. I could probably use some help getting, kind of refining those. We feel like we don't have the people sometimes, and so that's where we get to the final solution we're going to mention today, which is going to be Insight Connect. Insight Connect allows us to automate without coding. So if you do not have a development background, if the security team doesn't have dedicated development resources, Insight Connect can really speed up time to response. So for instance, if there is specific alerts in Insight IDR that are going to have the same investigation workflow and then one of two responses, we can automate that workflow for enrichment. For instance, the alert comes in, and then from that alert, we can parse IP address, we can parse the domain, or any process associated with that. And then we can enrich that data. We can, go through and look at the reputation of those IPs or those domains. So a few few different elements that we have options for in terms of ways that we can speed it up so that what we're really delivering and focusing on for security professionals is the thought work that the teams were hired to do and brought in to do in the first place. So Insight Connect, the other piece to this though too is I don't want to exclude folks with an automation or development background from this, because Insight Connect can be next level as well. If we're talking to a security team and they already have some PowerShell or Python scripts that are composed they're using for automation, you don't have to throw those away, because we can actually ingest those as part of an overall automated workflow. But the benefit there is, we'll bring in that custom snippet of code, but we'll provide each of the rest of those integrations or actions that you want to take, and by virtue of doing that through Insight Connect, the onus to make sure that the any updates are taken into account, that our integrations are up to date, and that everything is working is on Rapid7. So we can really provide a help with a lift there. And I think Insight Connect, leveraged in conjunction with Insight VM, Insight IDR, and the other solutions we've covered today, really provides the end user with an experience where they are being presented data and they're able to make those decisions quicker than they might otherwise be, getting us back to that speeding up time to response piece. All right. Well, so that's a really quick high-level overview and kind of down and dirty of the Rapid7 portfolio. What I wanted to do was just take a minute, take a breath myself, and see if there were any questions out there.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some questions for you. Let's see, Michael, first question that came in I wanted to ask you about is when it comes to Insight IDR, is Insight IDR, you kind of look at that as like the glue that connects all of the Rapid7 solutions together? And does that also extend outside to like third-party solutions they might have already in their IT infrastructure?
Absolutely. So the two primary use cases we see with Insight IDR is going to be that SIEM, which functions as that security data hub in a lot of cases. So within Insight IDR, we are going to be pulling in data from Insight VM, and we're continuing to integrate on integrations with our other solutions. So be sure and stay tuned for that. But Insight IDR is going to act as that hub. We're going to pull in that data from Insight VM, but we're also going to be able to pull in data from your other enterprise, like your antivirus applications, your endpoint detection and response applications, your firewalls, proxies. All of those can pull data in, and in conjunction, Insight IDR does give you the ability to centralize and manage your logs, which obviously can be important if you're engaged in any sort of regulatory compliance, but is also super helpful just from a troubleshooting standpoint. And along with our pre-configured rules and our pre-configured alerts we have built into Insight IDR, you're also able to go in and configure custom alerts. And those custom alerts can actually be alerts generated off of those third-party tools. It's a simple, intuitive process when it comes to those custom alert creation. And better, even better, you can actually trigger, an Insight Connect workflow based on those custom alerts. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, very good. Very interesting. What about cloud migration? There's a question here about, do you have any advice for organizations who started migrating or getting ready to migrate to the cloud? Can Rapid7 assist in that or better secure that in some way?
Absolutely. So the first recommendation I would have for cloud migration: build security into those processes before you even kind of take off, so to speak. Here's what that could look like practically. Rapid7 tools have integrations with a lot of the major cloud providers. So, a good first step would be going ahead and just setting up a few test instances and making sure that we are getting the appropriate data from those. And then once we're able to connect into those, we're getting the data we want to see. Some best practices would include a few different things. One, a cloud security assessment. So the cloud configuration assessment within Insight VM would give you the ability to monitor, those services with their cloud specific you couldn't scan traditionally, and would let you know of any configuration issues that you needed to address. 2 is going to be making sure that those golden images we're using as we spin up new compute instances are secure. We can scan those golden images, and in addition to that, we can bake the Insight agent into those golden images. So that way, as soon as that machine is spun up, it automatically starts reporting data back to Insight VM and Insight IDR. And by scanning those images on a regular basis, we're making sure that we're pushing out, secure machines from the get-go. Again, kind of pushing that security further left. And then the final recommendation within that is just going to be to continue to iterate and continue to look for areas to improve. One of the things that you can do with that, obviously, you're going to want to connect in with Insight IDR and get a holistic picture of the activities that are occurring there. But we're also, going to want to leverage Divi Cloud and just make sure that our policies are being enforced, and that we are seeing the cloud leverage in a secure way that makes things worthwhile for all those who are using it.
Excellent. There's a question that came in from Richard about can Rapid7 assist in mobile device security in some way?
So mobile device management, MDM, is really out of the scope of our solution portfolio at Rapid7. That said, the only caveat to that is if you're developing mobile applications, so applications designed for iOS or for Android, if they're heavily reliant on an API for the backend, that is something that we can definitely scan that backend API and ensure that nobody can do anything malicious from a dynamic standpoint by manipulating those calls.
Excellent. And then before we go, I want to ask you again about this 30-day free trial. So there's the Rapid7 Insight trial and the Rapid7 demo. If people go and sign up for the trial, can you kind of walk us through, like, what do they receive, or what is it they can do with that?
Absolutely. So our trials are going to be full functioning. And there's 2 different paths, really, that we see our clients going down. There's that self-guided trial path. You get on the website, you download the trial. We'll probably reach out to you and just make sure you have the support you need. But from that point, you really would be in the driver's seat. You can leverage our robust documentation as well as other resources in and around our website at rapid7.com. The other option for this would be, let's say you engage in a trial, but this is something where, okay, you really want to test a few capabilities of the solution that you're trialing. At that point, it would likely be a good idea to engage Rapid7, because if we get into a supported proof of concept trial, at that point you would have the support of an account team as well as one of our security solutions engineers like myself. And what we would do with you is we would walk you through best practices of how to implement the solution, make sure it gets up and running and meets those success criteria for you. The other added benefit to that, at least the feedback we've been getting from clients, is that route also allows them to not only trial out our technology, but also to trial out that partnership with Rapid7 and understand what it would be like to work with us on an ongoing basis and get a little snapshot.
Excellent. All right, that sounds easy. It sounds like a great opportunity for anyone out there looking to improve their security is to sign up for the free trial and just check it out for themselves, see how it can help their company. Michael, I'm afraid that's all the time we have, but it's been really great having you on. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, I've just brought up the poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Rapid7 solution? We didn't have time for all the other questions that came in. I'll have to forward those to Michael to get back to electronically. But thank you so much for the excellent questions, as always. If you do have more questions or would like some follow-up about Rapid7, make sure that you respond here on the poll. We do appreciate that. And now it's time for our next prize winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card. It's going out to Ken Charette from Wisconsin. Congratulations, Ken Charette from Wisconsin. Still 3 more MacBook M1s to give away on the event today and 4 more gift cards. So make sure that you stay tuned for those. All right. Thank you, everyone who responded there to the poll question. We do appreciate that. It's now time to move on. I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter on the Megacast. Welcome, Mr. Brandon Hoffman, Head of Security Strategy and CISO at Net Enrich. Brandon, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this session. My name is Brandon Hoffman. I'm the CISO at Net Enrich, and we're going to talk today a little bit about intelligent SOC. And intelligent SOC is a notion that we talk about here at Net Enrich to really help transform your security operations, to make it stronger, to make it more resilient, to make it smarter and more efficient. And diving right in, what we see here, the reason we took on this challenge originally is because of all the challenges that exist in the current security operations or SOC operations. So, of course, based on a recent study done by Ponemon, we can see that SOC, of course, is considered critical to the cybersecurity strategy, yet less than half the people who are running a SOC consider it effective. And the reason that we see such issues with effectiveness is because of increased workloads, because of the overwhelming amount of alerts, not enough people or personnel staffing it, lack of resources, and of course, adversary is always kind of changing the game and finding new ways. So because of all these issues, we decided to take on a challenge to help people make their security operations more intelligent. And, when you dive a little bit deeper into these problems, building, operating, managing a SOC is a long journey. And when you unpack all these issues, you really find kind of where the rubber meets the road, what the issues are that people are facing. And you guys listening to this may find yourself in any one or maybe in all 3 of these situations where when you're in a build mode, it's very complicated to decide what tool do you want to use. There's lots of different vendors out there, lots of different options. Of course, procurement's a challenge. Just the cost itself alone can be quite significant. If you're trying to operate a SOC, you have to, of course, configure it. You have to customize it to your environment as you should. You want to make sure that the tools are integrated. Sometimes that's easy. Sometimes it's not. As we know, integration across security tooling is not always as easy as some of the vendors tout it to be. And then, of course, there's tuning, right? So really tuning it down, making it efficient, reducing false positives, making sure that the alerts you do get are really valuable, really actionable. And then when you're managing it, and if you feel like you're in a good cadence and you're rolling along, there's lots of ongoing maintenance. You have to upkeep integrations. You have to evolve your use cases. You have to, of course, retain staff, and staffing is an issue across all 3 of these buckets. But ultimately, you want to derive business value, right? You want to drive outcomes for the business, and you want to get, what happens is it ends up being a high total cost of ownership and not a huge amount of return from the business perspective. So when we talk about intelligent SOC, we talk about helping people evolve to an intelligent SOC. We talk about pairing together machine and human intelligence. We talk about using SaaS plus functional sourcing and in integrating the notion of AI ops and cloud scale, right, to provide agility, to provide efficiency. And really, we focus on these 5 buckets on the right-hand side. And in the middle, you can see outcome-driven. We're really hyper-focused on driving outcomes for people. So not just really, yes, of course, we want to solve the immediate problem, but what's the overarching outcome that you want to obtain, right, from trying to evolve to an intelligent SOC? And the way that we do it is broken up into these 5 categories. So starting at the top, we have a big focus on big data and AI ops. So putting data together in a data lake, running different AI ops, running transforms, using machine learning to really do deeper correlation, deeper contextualization of the data, helping drive collaboration across tooling. And when we say contextualization, we mean, taking in information from traditional NetOps tooling, taking in information from cloud APIs. How do we get all this data into one place, have the machines crunch all of it, the stuff that people are bad at doing, right? And provide intuitive context to help make things more efficient and make things better. From a security perspective, just strictly speaking, and I'm going to dive deeper into this one, of course, a lot of times security operations is focused strictly on internal risk, right? Doing detection, on a threat that might be resident on the systems or on the network. But some of the context that they're missing to get that overall perspective, that broader perspective from a security notion is what does the organization look like externally? What types of opportunities exist for adversaries to come in and pair that data together to provide that holistic view from a security perspective to help take action in the right priority. We are focused, of course, on operationalizing intelligence, and a lot of vendors in security talk about this. A lot of times this discussion is around threat intelligence. So we're doing threat intelligence, of course. We're integrating a lot of that. We even curate our own. But we're also focused on taking intelligence, as I mentioned before, across different tool sets, across different domains. So all the security intelligence from your security stack, network intelligence from your gear, taking that all in, but also taking in the intelligence from your people and from our people, right? So combining that tribal knowledge, can we codify that into the system and have the machine understand it and do those things so you're at less risk when you have staff turnover and things like that. We're also very focused on resolution. Of course, we're talking about resolution intelligence is our overall message. And from resolution perspective, we don't just mean solving the incidents that happen right now or the offenses that are created. Of course, we do mean that, but we also mean more meaningful, like root cause analysis or closed loop problem solutioning, to really, is there a deeper problem here that caused this incident? Can we solve that deeper rooted issue so that we have fewer incidents in the future? Ideally, that would be a goal. And then we try to map all these outcomes from a transformation perspective to align IT with the business to try and make it less of a cost center and more of an enabler for the business outcomes from a security perspective. So when we talk about SOC, and I started talking about this on the previous slide, mostly security operations, threat detection, endpoint detection is all important. It's very important stuff to do, but it's all very focused on threat detection, right? Resident malware, finding ransomware, finding active exfiltrations or user-based issues, maybe it's insider threat. That's really threat detection. It's a very reactive stance. It's a critical step, but again, it's very reactive. On the flip side, being proactive, we're looking for exposures, or what adversaries would say are opportunities. So how is my organization exposed? Do we have code out there in an S3 bucket? Is our brand being abused somehow? Is somebody typo squatted our domain and set up a phishing campaign? Do we have public facing infrastructure that's misconfigured? Do we have third-party risk, right? This is becoming a big one, especially very recently. How does the organization look from an external perspective, and what types of exposures and opportunities, and pair that together with the threat detection so that you have a proactive and a reactive posture and process to get a more holistic risk picture. And that's what we mean when at NetEnrich we say intelligent SOC. We mean covering both of these domains, right, to the extent possible. Now, how do we do that? You might be looking at this saying, whoa, this is an eye chart. But really, the way that we do this is at the core is a platform, right? And that platform has hooks into and components and solutions all built into it. And so if we look at the first ring of threat detection, naturally we talk about SIM, SOC, SIM as a service. We talk about endpoint detection using endpoint telemetry, deploying an endpoint solution. Of course, we talked about AI and machine learning that's baked into everything that we do. Of course, from a standard basis, this is log traffic. It's also flow traffic, but it's also taking in APIs from your SaaS providers, right? You need that telemetry as people leverage more and more SaaS solutions. You need some of that telemetry, especially around identity, how that's federated, how the data is moving, is it encrypted, what's the data residency? All those things need to be considered when you're doing threat detection. And then when you move to the outer ring, which is exposure identification, how do you do that, right? The one of the things that makes us very unique is we have a built-in attack surface tool that does 24/7 monitoring of the attack surface for your organization beyond vulnerabilities. We'll look at that in a moment. Of course, vulnerability, a full vulnerability management program, internal, external, is critical to finding those exposures, finding those opportunities. You also have to look at your cloud APIs, right? That's infrastructure that you don't really control, but there's lots of course, all the cloud providers give good APIs so you can understand what's going on there, what the posture is, what the issues are, what exposures might exist. Doing something like breach and attack simulation, pretending like you're an adversary. This is more like an automated red teaming almost, where you're doing breach and attack simulation and you're having things coming in and out, and you're seeing what you detect and finding those holes, finding those issues proactively, right? And then of course having a good view of what your ops slash asset data is. From a holistic picture, what are all my assets? I know this sounds foundational, it sounds basic, but you have to have it, right? And then cutting across all of this is threat intelligence. And really this breaks into two categories. One, threat detection. That's where we talk about more classic threat intelligence indicators, compromise, artifacts, YARA rules for hunting and things like that. That goes right to the core, right to threat detection. And then from an exposure identification perspective, there's lots of other elements of threat intelligence that we can glean and operationalize. Things like certificate transparency, what brands are being talked about by actors or have been in recent breaches or dumps. What about domain intelligence or vulnerability intelligence? That one's very critical. There's lots of focus on that now, by saying it's great that we have the CVE, but is there even an active exploit? Are threat actors talking about this exploit? When was the last time the exploit was even used? Have they productized that code? All of those things should be considered when you're trying to put all this data together and prioritize it and take action to reduce risk meaningfully. So unpacking one method, we talk about a little bit about threat and attack surface. There's a couple things down here where we want to combine threat intelligence with attack surface. So threat intelligence, obviously most of you know this, what are adversaries doing? What are they up to? Attack surface is what do the bad guys see when they target our brand, right? So using a tool that does continuous monitoring with some analysts on the back end that are driving it, that can help prioritize things, that can tune it and tweak it, and contextualizing those findings with something like Knowledge Now that we provide, that's global threat news plus traditional threat intelligence, like we talked about, vulnerability intelligence, indicators, things like that. Putting that together gives you really a good sense of attack surface and what needs to be prioritized at it, giving you really threat actor insight, meaning what is the insight a threat actor can get on you and how, what opportunities does that represent? Now, what that looks like, of course, just this singular element gives you an overall risk score across your organization, which breaks it down into categories. Of course, you want to have categorical risk so that you know where to drive your priorities. So we can see threat correlation, vulnerability, brand exposure, and misconfiguration down there. And if we drill down into each one of these has a score, and it tells you what sub-elements are comprising that score. So do you have things like expired certificates? It sounds basic, but it's foundational to security, right? Do you have a risk of subdomain takeover because you're in a hybrid cloud environment, you're moving things around? Threat correlation is about, do you have infrastructure that's publicly facing that's known to be part of a malware campaign, for example? Do you have infrastructure that's been compromised that's publicly facing? Finding those things is very important. There's two phases to attack surface, right? One is discovery, right? So finding everything that's public facing. And then the second one, as we saw, is assessing it for risk. And so there's a total discovery of assets that takes place. It provides some initial insights from a discovery phase, but really we want to drive a little bit deeper and say, okay, what's the risk? This chart on the bottom left, I think is probably the most useful one because it gives you an overall picture of your attack surface trended over time. And if you're a manager, a VP, a CISO of security, you want to know that the investments you're making is meaningfully reducing your risk. And one measure is attack surface, right? So how do you support an ROI statement from security? Attack surface can help with that, because if your controls are working and the effort that you're putting in is reducing your attack surface, then you know that all the work has been worth it and you could measure some ROI there. You can also drill down into each one of these. This is just an example. It's great to find things in discovery, but it needs threat intelligence and it needs that context to understand, okay, we have this asset that's public facing, great. What does it mean? Why should I care, right? Well, it's potentially compromised because this risk rule was triggered, and that risk rule has a threat score of 65, meaning that this piece of infrastructure was recently linked with an intrusion method, known to be used in a phishing campaign, right? And it's great to know that. It's great to have that context and to help with the prioritization and get the details. But also, how do we make it even more intelligent? We say, this is how you fix it. A lot of people are in a situation where they're getting lots of alerts, they're getting lots of tickets and incidents, but nobody's helping them, guide them on how to fix these issues, right? So we have to provide guided recommendation, whether it's the right recommendation, whether you want to go ahead and implement that, or maybe you say, for my organization, I have a compensating control, or I have some other way to take care of it. At least there's something intelligent that you can use to help, really become more efficient in the actions you're taking. So, taking a look at threat intelligence, if you're using threat intelligence from another provider, you want to make sure it's well-rounded. So it should have contextual information. What we see here is more of like a news aggregation that helps you qualitatively assess, is this relevant to me? Is it hitting is it hitting my industry or my sector, or maybe my peers in the industry? But also, of course, having the hard, crunchy technical components that we all need. And also having that trend over time, that's very intuitive to help you understand, look, this piece of malware where we've seen an attack from it, it's trending up, we should shore up the defenses, or maybe it's trending down and we need to be less concerned with it. Same thing with specific methods of threat actors. What are their TTPs? How are those trending? How are vulnerabilities trending? We talked about that a little bit earlier in the presentation. Important to understand how things are trending from a threat intelligence perspective to help, again, shift your priorities, because they're always shifting in cyber anyways. And then, how do we drive these outcomes, right? In the end, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that the business needs? So by pairing together the intelligent SOC solution with a deep bench of experts that we have, that we help interact with customers, drive a lot of this solutioning for the customers. What are the outcomes we have? These are just some examples, right? Improved security workflow. Can we streamline this? Can we make it more efficient? Can we make it better for you? Can we meaningfully reduce your attack surface? Real-time threat detection is kind of a standard outcome here. But what about brand protection or cost reduction, right? That's one that's going to resonate really well with the business. Similarly, workforce retention. As we all know, it's difficult to hire and retain staff in cyber. If you make their jobs better, if you make their lives easier, if you make the work more interesting, you have a better chance of retaining those individuals. And ultimately, in the end, you want to get faster resolution, right? You want to decrease your MTTR. This is a standard KPI, right? You want to decrease dwell time. Can you do that? Because this solution is more comprehensive, it's more streamlined. And then we want to measure, right? We want to build metrics and KPIs across those outcomes, because you have to represent this to your management or executive management or maybe the board. They want to know what are the metrics and KPIs around the security operations, critical to do. And why would you want this out of one platform, right? So when you look at doing it yourself, looking at the cost, as you run this over time, you'll have more consumption. You'll need more skilled people. You need more technology, right? The requirements will grow because your business is changing, or maybe you're doing acquisitions or mergers, things like that. And the cost just continues to scale up. But by consolidating everything into kind of and streamlining things, you will get a significant reduction in load. These are some examples we've seen across the customer base, 40% reduction in the load, a faster time to value, right? So as the business is investing in cyber, in security, they're seeing faster return, lower total cost of ownership. Of course, that pairs with the last number, 35% reduction in overall SOC cost. That includes from initial creation to across through the runtime. And so, this is why you would potentially want to pursue a solution like this. And from an intelligent SOC, taking a higher perspective at resolution intelligence, just briefly, we kind of break it up into three buckets: contextual intelligence, actionable intelligence, and managed intelligence. That's where managed intelligence is where we have automated and human-based remediation actions taking place. But, going across that threat and exposure identification landscape, driving through resolution, transforming that into business outcomes. I don't have time to go through this whole chart, but really this is kind of our theory, our method on how we're going to help people improve security ops. And if you liked what we talked about, we'd love to have more conversations with you. We do have tons of downloadable assets, as we can see here listed. We got white papers and ebooks and all kinds of interesting stuff. If you want, you can visit our website at www.netenrich.com, or you can click these links to get direct access to the downloadable assets. So with that, I'll just say thanks for joining me. Hopefully you got something interesting out of the conversation or out of the talk here. And we'd love to have future conversations. So if you'd like to engage with us, we'd really enjoy that. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the remainder of the event.
All right, great presentation. Thank you so much, Brandon. Really appreciate that. For everyone out there in the audience, I've just brought up the poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the NetEnrich solution? And I'll leave that up while we do some questions from the audience. Brandon, you ready for some Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, I see a lot of questions have already been coming in, and I believe you've been responding to some of those already. So let's see. First one, I guess this is a good one to start with. Mark's asking, what do you feel is really different and unique about NetEnrich compared to other potential comparable solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that makes us different, a couple things. One is that we're really focused on providing, really a 360-degree view from security operations, as opposed to focus just simply on the detection of threats that may already be resident. We really try to take the customers to a proactive stance to try and find, exposure identification, as I was discussing, because we think it's important to have that well-rounded kind of holistic view so that you can contextualize things properly and really prioritize the things that are most important from a risk perspective.
Nice, very nice. Another question here, they're asking, does NetEnrich provide both the people for this intelligent SOC as well as the tools, or just the people, or just the tools, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So, in the standard version of our offering, as a managed service, it does come with people that help support the customers. Typically, it comes with what we classify as L1 triage support. So, as things are identified in the environment, we have some, the AI does its magic, and then the people look at the output of that. And if they want to escalate something, they'll escalate something to an incident. They'll mark things as false positives, and they'll kind of keep an eye on things. So we definitely do that.
Very nice. And then you mentioned on the slide there as well, AI and ML. How does that work in threat intelligence and detection? Where does that fit in?
Yeah, so the AI really sits on the back end, right? It's taking in all the different data points, and that's where the real contextualization and correlation is magic, right? Because there's the SIM that does its correlation. There's some other tools that take in threat intelligence and use bits of that to contextualize things. But this AI engine on the back end is where we're trying to really get to root cause correlation. So as opposed to simply identifying the surface level issue and you continue to have incidents that are related, the AI engine takes a deeper pass at that to find, ideally what the root cause would be so that you no longer have incidents that are similar to those in the future. That's the goal.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Neil was asking, how long does it typically take to deploy this or set this up, what you described in your presentation?
Yeah. Most customers are fully onboarded, somewhere within 30 to 60 days. Sometimes it's faster, depends on the environment, but we have a really, really rapid onboarding process. In fact, some of the intellectual property that we built around this solution that's core to what our offering is the onboarding technology. So the shipper technology we built in-house, and that's really to help get people time to value faster. So if you were to subscribe to this service, you should be getting fully up and running, worst case 60 days. Most people, we've seen some within 10 business days. So it's somewhere around that range.
Okay. And then they're asking, what does YARA stand for in your slides? YARA?
Yeah, YARA is a set of rules used by threat hunters and malware researchers. It's used to identify like binaries, and uses Boolean expressions to look inside of like memory dumps and things that to identify malware in systems that it's not in transit. So meaning you can't, it couldn't be detected by antivirus because it's not actively running, but it's just sitting in memory, some remnants of it. And so Yara is that's what it's all about. There is a wealth of information about Yara rules is kind of a standard around malware detection.
Got it. Okay. All right. So, I mean, there's a number of folks out here who are obviously very excited about this. What do you recommend people do if they want to get started with NetEnrich?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get started with NetEnrich, we have a couple different things actually going on right now. We have free trials going on of the attack surface module. It's really, really easy to onboard that. And in fact, we even have, as far as I know, a trial going on with the SOC service where you can try it out for 30 or 60 days risk-free, from what I understand. So, we'd love to get engaged with anybody who's interested in learning more or give it a shot and see what kind of value we can offer. You can find all those details at our website, netenrich.com. So we'd love to have a chat about it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the event today, Brandon. Have a great day.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great day yourself.
Thank you to NetEnrich for supporting today's event. Check out the Handouts tab right there, and you'll find a PDF asset that you can download from NetEnrich, which talks about right-sizing SOConomics, maximizing investment value with the intelligent SOC. Looks like a very well-done asset there. Make sure you check that out, download it before the event is over. Could be very helpful for anyone who's wanting to learn more about this solution. And with that, it's time for our next prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Gloria Perez from California. And our next MacBook M1, this is going to Tim Louie from Oregon. Congratulations, Tim Louie from Oregon. All right, and with that, it's now time to move on to our next presentation. I'm excited to welcome now Mr. Tim Woods, Vice President of Technology Alliances at Firemon. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Happy to be here today.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you. Take it away.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody who's joined us today and is on the line with us. Appreciate you cutting time out of your schedule to be with us. And if I have any fellow Texans out there today, I hope that you are staying safe in our current polar vortex as well. So I'll try to get through this pretty quick with you guys, and hopefully we can maybe even catch up a little bit and answer all those questions at the end. So how do we keep from, the title of the slide here was, protect yourself, protect your network from yourself, or how do I keep from shooting myself in the foot? We're all experiencing a build out of our hybrid estates today. We're, embracing digital transformation, cloud first strategies, and we're seeing that landscape, expand. We're also seeing the threat landscape expand. Many of our enterprise customers, they have multiple cloud providers and their own private clouds as well. So not only public cloud, but private cloud. But we have hit a few bumps in the road along the way. One of those being, and I'm going to point your direction over here to the little slide that says today's reality, where it says too many policies in too many places and increasing rates of change. And all these are really true. Problem when we have too many policies in too many places is not necessarily a bad thing, but if we don't manage it accordingly, it can become a bad thing. And that's what we've seen, not just us saying that, but we've seen the analysts also kind of reiterate that as well. ISG says network complexity keeps growing. Manual configuration, makes things more time consuming, and misconfigurations run rapid and stuff like that. So the policies that are meant to protect us are actually becoming a threat vector themselves. So when they're not managed accordingly. And so it's important that we stay on top of those. One of the ways that Firemon addresses this is we try to give you unified visibility across that hybrid landscape, whether it's on-prem or whether it's at the secure edge, or maybe you've embraced SASE, or maybe you have an MPLS backbone, and obviously up into the cloud, we have virtual firewalls, we have network security groups, but all along that hybrid expanse, we have these different points of enforcement control. And being able to unify, normalize, and get a common view of those policies rather than jumping from one platform to another in multiple windows and trying to correlate all the things that we're trying to correlate at any given point in time, being able to unify that in a single lens is definitely one way that you can greatly decrease a certain amount of complexity, which I believe is one of our worst enemies. And you'll hear me talk about complexity throughout the next, 15, 20 minutes or so. The first thing we have to do, though, is we have to understand what we have, what is out there, and so we have to make sure that we're on top of discovering our estate. And, of course, things change quite rapidly, too. And when I would say this also, we have to make sure that we can detect change when change happens. We hear it time and time again. We see it pop to the very top of the most challenges list, and that is the challenge of visibility. But this may sound a little bit like a cliche, but it's really, really, really true. You cannot protect what you don't know about. You cannot secure adequately those things that you can't see. And so, imagine you're been given the responsibility to protect a visiting dignitary to the country. You don't know when they're getting here, how they're getting here, where they're going. How are you going to protect an asset that you don't know about, right? How can you put the appropriate security controls around something when you don't know where it resides or how long it lives and things of that nature? And unfortunately, some companies have found this out too late. Even back in 2015 or 2019, we saw over 1,500 data breaches, almost 165 million or so records exposed. And now the names that you see I have listed here, this is just 2020. And we already see billions, right? Not millions, but billions of records exposed. And now if you've been following the news, now you're hearing about Comb, which is a combination of a massive combination of breaches of breach data that they put out on the dark web, and it's for sale and for purchase. And so now you become part of a bigger blob of somebody gaining access to the information that's been compromised. So, as if the polar vortex wasn't enough in Texas. So now we have that to deal with. But if we go back and we look at some of the characteristics that related to firewall breaches, bad actors taking advantage of overly permissive rules. And you're going to hear me talk about overly permissive rules throughout here as well. Inadvertent access. When a resource that we're providing access to gets decommissioned, but we fail to take the rules out of the policies that was providing access to that resource, and then maybe that IP address gets reused, and then all of a sudden we have inadvertent access, which is what the QSAs and the auditors and the assessors call it. And next thing you know, we're providing access to something that we never intended to provide access to, which is a bad thing. Or we have known vulnerabilities within our network that are unpatched, and all of a sudden we open access, and that new access that we provides access to that vulnerability, or the vulnerability takes advantage of that access that we're providing. Too often I see that we don't correlate those known vulnerabilities with our compensating controls. And when we don't correlate the two, then we can, and let's face it, anytime you're poking a hole in your perimeter, and we know, as I started out here, that perimeter has vastly increased, right? The hybrid landscape, the estate has vastly increased. And so as we poke holes and provide access in that perimeter, risk never goes down. It always goes up as we're providing greater access. And so we have to make sure that we're not increasing risk or try to not increase risk as we open up holes in our fabric. Bad actors discover firewall misconfigurations using automated penetration scanning. Yes, the bad guys are using automation, and they are using it every single day. And this has been proven, by people opening up honeypots and exposing data on the internet and then timing it to see how long before somebody tries to exploit it. And a shadowed rule. Shadowed rules that allow unintended. If you're not familiar with shadowed rules allowing unintended access, really what that is, a shadowed rule is nothing more than a duplicate rule providing the opposite action, meaning one might allow and one might block. The problem is they don't look alike, and they're never just next to each other either. One is in the middle of the policy, and policies today, it's not just 500, 600 rules. We see 40,000, 50,000, 100,000 rules now in policies is not uncommon at all. And trying to find these rules that contradict each other can be unsurmountable, especially if you're trying to do it manually. You're just not going to find those things. And so a shadowed rule, if you're trying to manually understand the behavior of a policy and you misinterpret a shadowed rule, that can, you can think you're doing something that you're not. And that's not a good thing. What's interesting here too is you look at the number of those things that I just reviewed showing up in the top 5 misconfiguration list too. These are the top 5 things that cause us to shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak. So failing to remove that unused rule, recycling access, creating overly permissive rules. There it is again. Setting up incorrect access, misconfiguration. During a vetted rule change, all of a sudden we cause an impact to the business because we didn't correctly vet that change up prior to the actual implementation of it. Violating compliance. And, here again, I hope that when a change happens that you're able to vet that change. You should be able to detect that change, and that change should be vetted, meaning that, hey, did that change? There's anytime a change happens within the system, within a network, there's some basic questions that have to be answered, right? Did that change, number one, was it successful? Number two, did it have a negative impact to my compliance posture, my business posture, my security posture? Was it expected? And was it documented, right? There's all these things. And so when we open up that access and it violates compliance, it means we're either not assessing that change correctly or we didn't detect that change in order to assess it. And I've got an antidote for that later on down here because you're going to hear me talk about something, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I want to be faster than change. So let's put that in the back of your mind. Think about that. I want to be faster than change. So allowing rules to bypass a proxy. All of these hit the top 5 list. 91%, so I'm going to let that number sink in here just a second. 91% is the number of organizations that have not completely automated their network security policies. That means that they're still relying on manual efforts to manage those policies. Automation is, we call it the change agent needed to eliminate guesswork and errors stemming from manual tasks. Employing automation is a proven path to reduce costly mistakes. It's a proven path to reducing misconfiguration. And as we reduce misconfiguration, we're going to reduce human error and open ourselves up, reduce the probability of us opening ourselves up for greater risk as well. And that brings us to an opportunity to hear from you. The next slide is actually a poll. And let me advance that. There we go.
Yeah, the poll on the screen.
Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to call everyone's attention to the poll on the screen that says, how significant is your organization's planning to increase network security, the network security process automation over the next year? Or how significantly, is your organization planning to increase network security process automation? And you can see the options there on the screen. I can see we've got a lot of responses already coming in. I'll share the results of this here with you. Let's give everyone a moment to respond.
I'm liking it.
Me too. All right. We got a lot of responses in. Let me go ahead and share the results on this one. And it looks like 35% said moderately, 21% said significantly. So if you kind of combine those two, that's 56% roughly who either plan to do some moderate or significant level of process automation improvement over the next year. What's your take on that, Tim?
So we actually did, this was a question that we had pulled out of a survey that we're preparing that we'll release here sometime in the near future. And so if we look at the next I think I have the next slide here. It actually shows you the results from this larger survey. So that's why I was excited to share it with our sample audience today to see. But you can see that it lined up pretty well. You know, moderately planning to increase our automation efforts was 45%, and slightly was 38%. So that's pretty much in line with what the audience polled too. So looks like everybody's pretty well aligned as far as what they're doing. But I'm glad to see that number, anytime I see higher than 40% in that moderately, it means that we're embracing it, we're thinking about it, or we've already, you know, we've started down the path for it as well. So that's good. I'm encouraged by that, quite honestly. You know, there are a few questions, I think, that I would say for any strategic automation initiative, these are what I would consider some mandatory questions that need to be answered. And I'm not going to hit all of these, but you can see as you read these, I'll let you guys read these, you can see very quickly here that can it be measured? Can it be quantified? Does it reduce risk? I think, which is job number one, right? Anytime, I think all our job is trying to reduce risk to a level that's acceptable by the business, and does it save my company money? So I think there's some very good questions for any good strategic initiative, you know, that needs to come into focus. And as you're looking at things to automate, and I get this question a lot, is, well, Tim, where do I start? You know, there's certain events. There's trigger events that maybe as the result of a SOAR, you know, an event happening on the network. There's changes to applications that are already existing, or modifications, plan changes to things that we've already rolled out. This could be part of our agile development updates. Can happen sometimes, you know, multiple times a day or a week. And then, of course, there's new service rollouts, which can also spawn change. There's things that we can automate, and of course there's things that maybe don't fall well into the automation. But, you know, from talking to our enterprise customers, what we've come to realize that somewhere between 40 to 60% of the things that take place, many of the changes that take place, can actually be templatized and put on a fast track, meaning that we can bypass some of the things that actually slow us down. As we're trying to gain parity with the speed of the business, as we're trying to honor the requests that are coming in, and as security, we don't want to be that blocker. We don't want to be that roadblock. We want to be an enabler. You know, there's ways that we can actually do this. And you'll see these. I apologize. It's an eye chart. It's an eye strain on the left here, but I'm going to point you to one of these. I still see people using email and spreadsheets in order to track changes, to initiate changes, to request changes, to respond to changes. And there's what I would say to you. If you're using email and spreadsheets, I promise you, as you grow, they will not scale. Get rid of that. One of the first places I would look to automate. But again, there's things we can fast track. There's things that are still going to take the traditional approach. And it's not that we can't accelerate the traditional approach as well, but we need to be able to leverage some of the core functionality into a policy management system along that process workflow. There's so many benefits to automation. I'm not going to read every one of these to you either, but I will stand on a couple of them for the sake of time. Anywhere I can eliminate costly misconfigurations, and again, I think misconfiguration is another word for human error. Anywhere I can help my people be more efficient, more consistent, then I want to embrace that. I want to fund that. I think that's an ROI that's worth investing in. And I want something, and of course it has to reduce costs as well. But take any one of these that are out here. These are all in their own right very important, and I don't mean to take away from the benefit of any one of them, but again, anytime I can reduce misconfigurations, that means that I am challenging unnecessary complexity within my environment. This is a real customer example here, and I'm just going to touch on it very quickly. This particular company, real company, was challenged with some of their automation initiatives. They'd had a couple of missteps. They embraced us to help them with their initiative, and using the FireMine orchestration API, we were able to build our assessment engine and dynamic assessment into their workflow provisioning, and it saved them their ROI. They saw real-world ROI results that allowed them to reduce the amount of time that it required them to provision their application. But more importantly, we were able to, as I talked about reducing those misconfigurations, we were able to reduce errors that they were tracking. They were actually tracking the percentages of changes that they had implemented that had to be backed out or caused an impact to the business, and being able to affect that number in a positive manner was a really big deal to them. Here too, I just want to make sure I stay in sync here. You know, we've been providing, for those, if you're not familiar with FireMon, we've been providing automation help to our customers for years and years, you know, from automated change detection. You know, I talked about always being able to detect change when change happens, being able to automatically apply automation to the policies as it relates to behavioral analysis, and to contextual change assessment. I mean, we've seen firsthand some of the fantastic ROI results many of our customers have experienced. And of course, my favorite one is, you look, 90% is nothing to sneeze at, 90% reduction in firewall rule creation time. But that one down there that says 40% reduction in complexity, that is my favorite, because I think complexity is the biggest offender and creates the most amount of stagnation, you know, in our automation efforts and approaches as well. So that's a big one for me. Traditional approaches force you to slow down and to stay secure. Here, I told you earlier that I want to be as fast or faster than change. And so what do I mean by that? You know, we talked earlier about the expansion of the threat surface across our hybrid landscape and the increasing rates of change. I don't believe that it's enough to reactively detect a bad change. I want to analyze a proposed change or a proposed change request proactively in the context, and this is what's most important, in the context of the destination policy. Trying to analyze a change outside of the context of the policy or trying to assess it from a compliance perspective as well, or a best practice, is not always achievable. So I want to inspect this proposed change in the context of the destination policy and prevent something bad from happening before it's implemented. That's the kind of value that our customers are seeing, and that's the kind of value that the customers are wanting. And so we want to embrace that type of change. FireMon enjoys a real healthy ecosystem with a number of very premier technology alliance partners. But my point here is, I would urge you to assess your vendors if you're in the middle of a vendor selection, or you're going through a selection criteria, or you're defining requirements right now, whether you're using it or not today, your vendors that you select should have a very strong commitment to a robust API structure. If you want to raise the total value of your combined security solutions, then you have to be able to exchange and/or enrich each other's data from the platforms that you have in place. Having a strong commitment to an API structure enables you to do that. And so the last thing I would just say, these are the tenets of a agile network security policy platform, which is what FireMon is known for. You know, I talked about you can't protect what you can't see. Visibility is so critically important. Being able to detect change when change happens, but also understanding what you have that should have the appropriate security controls applied to it. Being able to scale to the size of the environment is critical as well. You can have the best technology on the planet, but if it doesn't scale to the size of your environment, then it will not be embraced. It will not be adopted. You need to be able to react quickly, and especially in today's hybrid estate environments, change happens very quickly, and you need to be able to adjust to that change very quickly. You need a robust support for the devices that you're trying to normalize and protect and give insight into, and you need that robust API. So I'm going to close it up there. Hopefully I hit it on the mark, and we'll see what questions we have.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation. We do have some questions for you. While we do those Q&A with the audience, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there. that says, what additional information would you like about the FireMon solution? And we had a number of folks that said they use FireMon, they love FireMon, works great for them. So always good to see that. One of the questions that came in here, first off, they're asking is, when it comes to automation, what level of automation do you typically see out there? Like, how far can you really take this?
You know, there's definitely, depending on it's all right. So I'll try not to be too broad in this answer, but at the same time, I think part of it depends on the maturation of the company. In other words, what you can consume and where you're at in your path, or where you're at in your journey to digital transformation and your cloud first strategies. But as I would say, the answer is as much as you can absorb, as much as you have the resources to dedicate to. But I go back to that list again too. I want to make sure that I set my achievable mile markers, my goals, because we've seen too many strategic automation efforts fail because either all the necessary departments within the company weren't aligned, or we didn't assign the correct resources in order to achieve my success. So again, I think it really depends on where you're at in your journey and the maturation of the various departments, but alignment is critically important in any automation efforts. All the departments need to come together. Having a silo or any type of inability to share information can stall the progress of an automation initiative very quickly.
Excellent advice. All right, next question. Let's see. They're asking about what scans does FireMon perform. They're mentioning CIS, NIST standards, and OEM best practices. What type of scanning does FireMon or what level of scanning does FireMon do?
You bet. That's really what it sounds like the question. So, and if I get it wrong, feel free to private message me or hit me directly. We have over 500 different controls out of the box that are placed into assessments. One of the strongest features of the platform is our dynamic assessment engine, compliance engine. We ship out of the box with NIST controls, PCI, FISMA, GDPR, HIPAA. There's a best practice. But what's more powerful is you have the ability to modify those existing assessments that are already kind of pre-made, so to speak, and to create your own. You can draw from those controls, or you can either create your own controls. And what's really cool about we have over 10 different control types, meaning that a control could be a regex. You could use a regex to look for a particular textual pattern, or it could be a usage indication. I know that this rule is a critical rule that is critical to the business and business continuity. And if this rule ever falls below a certain percentage of usage, I know immediately there's a problem. Or it could be, that I'm looking for a rule that becomes blocked by a higher level rule. And again, my business continuity has become blocked. Or service risk analysis. Somebody just implemented a port or an application or access to a port or application from one zone to another zone because I've built my zones. Maybe I'm trying to apply a zero trust strategy to my environment, and I've created my either segmentation or micro-segmentation, but I've created these zones of controls, and now I need to create a zone matrix to understand what's coming in and out of my zones as well. We support that. And so, and then we can assess that. So we definitely provide dynamic assessments, but more importantly, as I pointed to earlier, I want to run those assessments that you point to, whether they're the ones that we have pre-canned for you or they're your own that you have modified to your environment. I want to be able to apply those at the time of proposed change. But yeah, a number of different assessments, all the ones, NIST being at the top for sure.
Excellent, excellent. And then I think last question we probably have time for, and that is if folks want to get started with FireMon, what do you recommend?
We're always available to help you with an evaluation. We provide, evaluation licenses that you can apply within your own environments. We also provide the technical resources that you can leverage to minimize any learning curves and to accelerate your evaluation process. So, yeah, I mean, if you're challenged by any of the things that we've seen today, And it goes so much more. It can go so much deeper than just that too. I mean, it could be compliance, it could be automation, it could be that you're just struggling with this simple policy hygiene across your infrastructure. So, yeah, reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help you stand the platform up, put an instance in your environment running, and provide you technical resources to guide you through it and help you minimize that learning curve. Firemon.com.
Firemon.com. All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, Tim.
Thank you.
And thanks to Firemon for supporting the event. Check out the Firemon resource there in your handouts tab. It's a really cool infographic with all kinds of statistics around COVID-19, network change, misconfiguration, risk. A really cool resource, so make sure that you download that one before you go. And with that, it's time for our next prize drawing. I'm just going to leave the poll question up for everyone to answer while I announce the next prize winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Julie Harrington from Texas. Congratulations to Julie Harrington in Texas. Still 2 more grand prizes and gift cards to give out on the event today, so make sure you stay tuned for those. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter on today's Megacast. Welcome, Mr. Martin Crew, Director for Industry Solutions at Gigamon. Martin, are you there?
David, yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Great to have you. Take it away.
Thanks, David. Nice to be back on the latest Megacast. I'm surprised you resisted the urge to do the from Firemon to Gigamon transition, but here we are. Okay, hello, everybody. So as David said, my name is Martin Crew, and I'm responsible for Industry and Solutions Marketing at Gigamon. So I'm not going to do our standard company pitch. I wanted to speak directly to the topic of up-leveling security and network capabilities. So about 15 minutes of content and questions. I just want to sort of talk through a few things. So the first is the hybrid cloud, which seems to be the environment that we're all living in these days. Has this really become the new normal? Is it going to stay that way? And then talk about the challenges of up-leveling capabilities in that environment, and talk to our key belief that visibility is the key to this up-leveling process. And then I will go into a couple of our usual slides and talk about Gigamon hybrid cloud visibility, then summarize with 2 or 3 takeaways, and then we'll go into our Q&A session. So that's my agenda for today, very, very straightforward. Okay, I want to start out with some research from 451, which is one of the research organizations that we really spend a lot of time talking to and who we really like when it comes to looking at sort of what's happening at the sort of the frontier of technology. So we've done a lot of research with them over the last year looking at issues around the hybrid cloud. Clearly, as organizations look to up-level their security and networking capabilities, this is one of the biggest issues that they face, the fact that the old on-premise data center is long gone. Virtualization probably remains as part of overall environments, but increasingly people are adopting not just one cloud, but multiple clouds. And within those clouds, there are multiple levels of implementation of new security and networking capabilities. So our takeaway is very much the same as 451's, and I think of all the analysts, which is that the hybrid cloud is the new normal. And particularly when you look at larger organizations, this is absolutely the case. So if you look at the little infographic at the bottom of this slide, the largest segment of organizations who believe that hybrid is the way to go is actually the largest companies. So this is very much an inescapable part of reality. And we believe it's not just today's fad. We believe this is going to be a really long-term trend. So if you look at this infographic, you'll see 2 columns. One is for 2020, so last year, and one is 2022, next year. And this shows that the traditional on-premises model, which accounted for about 38% of applications deployed last year, is going to diminish and will be down around 14%. And the big gainer here is hosted private cloud. So we are seeing this movement with all of our customers. We have about 4,000 customers worldwide. They're some of the largest, most complex organizations out there. And we are very much seeing this trend playing out with our customers. So as these organizations look to up-level their capabilities across the board, the complexity that comes from working in the hybrid cloud is one of the key issues that they've got to deal with. Move now from the abstract to some practical issues. So what does that mean? Before we do that, I just want to get a quick poll question here. So I want to find out from the audience, is the hybrid cloud the new normal for your organization? So we'll just pause for a few seconds. Wow.
Yeah, lots of responses already coming in to this. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So thank you very much for responding. Appreciate that. And that's very much what we'd expect to see. I mean, it's broadly in line with the information from 451 that, you know, the majority of organizations are now operating in this environment. So let's now talk about some of the challenges that this presents for ambitious IT organizations, ambitious security organizations who are looking to up-level their overall capabilities. So with a hybrid, you get increased complexity, and that creates, I'm saying here, new challenges. They're not necessarily new challenges, but they're exacerbated challenges. So 3 areas just to sort of think about that we see a lot of our customers dealing with as they move into this environment and accelerate adoption of these different cloud environments. The first is the expanded attack area. So this is obvious. One of the primary reasons that organizations adopt the cloud is to deploy new large-scale applications at either a scale that touches everybody within their organization or touches tens of thousands of users in the partner networks or in the consumer world, whatever, scaling often beyond thousands into millions these days. And it's not just users. So with users, you have more and more devices. So I'll say all, that's a generalization. Many users access the network on multiple devices. And as well as user-driven devices, you obviously have a lot of unmanaged devices these days. So all the smart devices that are encompassed by Internet of Things or operational technology or industrial control systems, increasingly, they represent areas of vulnerability, and they need to be managed as part of this process. Then within the cloud architectures, you've got things like containers and microservices, which don't often comply with traditional security models. So all of these lead to a greatly expanded attack area. You also have one other thing that we see, which is inconsistency across different development teams. So particularly with large-scale organizations, you may have multiple development teams around the world, for example, or within a region, however you're structured. If they're not working to pretty rigorous standards, you often get people doing things the way that they think is best. I mean, they may start out with taking corporate standards as a starting point, but often they deviate from that. Often to do something quickly, they'll take a shortcut, or they'll learn from other best practices that aren't necessarily embraced yet by the company. So every unique development presents a challenge of ensuring that whatever you're doing in that development area is consistent within an organization. Otherwise, this expanded attack area is always a possibility. Second thing in the cloud environment is the nature of elastic workloads. So many of the tools that we have deployed historically in our on-premises environments and even virtualized environments were geared to work around fairly static workloads. You knew who the users were going to be. You knew roughly what the storage was. You knew roughly what the growth was going to be. There weren't the dramatic peaks that you often see in the cloud. So managing these elastic workloads is a real issue. What tools do you need to manage them? Do you need to use your existing on-premises tools? Do you need to use cloud-native tools? Do you need to use a mix of the both? And what capacity do you need? Do you buy tools to cope with the projected peak workloads, or do you make some other trade-off calculation and not have that capacity available? So the elastic workload, the management of that is quite a significant challenge. And then it's not just that in the cloud workloads are elastic, it's that they're ephemeral. Many companies who've moved to containerized models, containers can spin up in matters of microseconds. They can exist for a couple of seconds, then they're gone. But if something happens, if there's a security incident in one of those containers, you can't afford, literally, you can't afford for the information about that container just to vaporize with the container. There's got to be some way to actually track and manage these ephemeral workloads. And that is very, very difficult. There are very few tools that are capable of doing that. But it's something that if you are really going to keep track of the security of your organization, you've got to be mindful of how you do that. So again, as we move into these environments, the challenges grow, I'm not going to say exponentially, but they grow very significantly, both in the number, in the frequency, and in the complexity. And one of the things that I think we all learned through 2020 with a lot of the security events that happened at the back end of last year were that you cannot guard against all of those issues all of the time. It's the nature of these environments that there are some risks that are going to get through. There are some disastrous events that are going to forestall most networks at some point in their existence. So our belief is that whilst you have to do absolutely everything you can to protect the network, one of the things you've also got to have is full visibility into that network so that when something happens, you've got the visibility, you've got the highest possible quality of data in order to detect, to remediate, and then to learn from that and prevent it happening again. So one of the critical things that we see our customers asking us for as they move into this hybrid environment is, how do we get the same level of visibility that we had in our internal networks? How do we replicate that in the cloud? Because we do not want to give up on that. So we're very, very focused in working with those customers on making sure they've got this very high quality data, that it's consistent across all of the environments that make up their hybrid network. And really we see three things there. So the first is reliability. So the data has to be available as and when you need it. And it's got to be consistent across all the platforms. If it's not consistent, you can bet your bottom dollar that those inconsistencies are going to equate to gaps in visibility, blind spots within the organization. So you have to make sure you've got reliable, consistent data. Second thing is you've got to make sure it's relevant. So we all know there is so much information out there that you cannot manage the level of detail you want, absolutely everything. So one of the critical things that our customer organizations look to us for is relevance. And that really comes down to providing context. So how do you actually take one piece of information and relate that to multiple other related or semi-related pieces of information to provide the context so that you're not looking at just one piece of information in isolation. You're looking at something that exists, that has context, and from that context you can say, okay, based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like XYZ is happening, and maybe it's an attack could be developing. Maybe it's a performance problem in a particular database. Maybe it's an application giving slow response times, whatever it is. Finding all the bits of information that clue you into that and correlating them to give you this relevance and context as quickly as possible is important, not just for security, but having the ability to figure out what's relevant and what's irrelevant may, for example, prevent you sending a huge amount of irrelevant data to a tool that may already be overloaded and can't process any more data. So only sending the right relevant information to the right tools can be critical, not just in security and security and performance, but also in reducing the cost of the traffic on the network. And then finally, real time. obviously the enterprise today operates in real time. It used to be a few years ago that we were talking about the real-time enterprise, and it was like some novel concept. But when it came down to it, the reality was there was very little real-time processing done within large-scale organizations. Most of it was, a couple of minutes response times, an hour batch updates, those type of things. But now the reality is that as we've moved into the cloud, as APIs have become the norm, as automation has become the norm, as we were just hearing from Tim at Firemon, as all these things become the norm, we really are operating in real time. So we've got to make sure that the data that we're looking at is a complete real-time representation of what's happening within the organization. So these are the challenges that Gigamon is focused on. So our view is that to get this information, you need to get down to the network level, because that's where the information exists today. That's where you have the physical information coming together, the virtual, the cloud, the user, the device, and the application information. So our view is that this is where you need to get real control of what's happening with the organization to be able to up-level security and networking capabilities. So how do you do it? Well, before we get to the how do you do it, let's just talk about this. So, that's just not me giving my opinion or Gigamon giving our opinion on it. This is visibility is rated as the #1 priority that CISOs have. So again, going back to some 451 data, some custom research that they did last year, 54% of all the CISOs who were surveyed said getting this level of visibility is the #1 priority. Second priority here, 42%, is network performance monitoring. So to us, visibility and monitoring are very, very closely related. So whether you take the 54 number, whether you take 54 and some elements of 42, doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that for CISOs, visibility and monitoring everything that's happening on the network is clearly understood to be a core priority. But how do you do that? So the way we've done it historically, as this slide shows, is that you have all your various devices, remote sites, the internet, the public cloud, all coming in through firewalls, data being routed, all of this good stuff. And for every one of those elements on a network, there are specific tools that you need to manage those. So we've typically done this, what's now very convoluted, point-to-point integration, essentially. We've said that every tool is going to talk to every one of the devices that it needs to and get its own unique feed. And that leads to massive complexity. And as we move into the hybrid cloud, as we move into multi-cloud, and as within individual clouds, we're actually looking at multiple different deployment environments. This gets more and more complex. Our view is that it becomes so complex it's actually untenable. Both for performance and security reasons, this is just not a good way to up-level your capabilities. So Gigamon's view is that the best way to handle this is to use an abstraction layer. And that is what our product really is. So the Gigamon Visibility and Analytics Fabric is an abstraction layer that sits between all of the data, all of the application, all of the user, all the device sources, and all of the tools that monitor them. So instead of there being a one-to-one relationship between the devices and the tools you're using to manage them, what we do is we plug into all of those endpoints, and then we plug in once to the various tools. So you're massively reducing the number of agents that you have to deploy. As you do that, you reduce the amount of traffic that flows across the network, because as traffic flows through the Gigamon system, we do 4 things. The first is the acquiring of the information. So we basically get the information plugged in, and all the data that's going to security, going to networking, going to performance tools is flowing through Gigamon. So that's really the acquire phase. The second thing is that we aggregate that information. So from Gigamon, you essentially have a single point on the network where you've got visibility into all of these flows, where all the information is coming from, where it's going to, how's it going, what port is it coming from, what protocols is it using, is it encrypted? If it's encrypted, how do you want to handle the encryption? All those type of issues. So we aggregate everything together. And then we can take the information through a transformation process. So if, for example, some of your tools, maybe your advanced performance monitoring tools, are capable of using things like NetFlow rather than taking raw traffic data, we can actually transform raw packet data into NetFlow metadata. In that particular case, that generally reduces traffic to those tools by 90 to 95%. So this transformation process can be very significant. And it's not just things like converting to NetFlow. One of the things that I think we're all aware of, in some ways one of the dirty little secrets of the networking environment, is that when you have all these different tools tapping the network in different places, you often get a lot of duplicate data. Some studies show it's actually as much as 80% on networks. We typically see figures somewhere in the 50 percentile range. But even 50% of traffic being duplicate that's going to those tools is creating inefficiencies in the tools. It's putting a lot more traffic flow on the network that impacts everything else on the network. So we do things like deduplication. We do things like the filtering of traffic. We do things like flow mapping to take information from a specific port directly to a tool without going anywhere else on the network. So there's a lot we can do to transform that information. So we make the traffic flow to those tools significantly more effective, and we also provide a center point for analyzing information. Again, back to one of my previous points about context. Once you've actually acquired this information and aggregated it, you're in the ideal situation to correlate, derive context and relevance from that information. So that's one of the very critical things that we do using the Gigamon Visibility and Analytics Fabric. As we move into the cloud, we have exactly the same level of capability as we have in the on-premises environment. So as we move to this hybrid cloud, one of the things we're very focused on is the first of these bullets, ensuring that information from any source can get to any destination, having only been tapped once. So we have virtual taps that can be deployed in each of these environments, and that obviates the need for many of the tools that you're using to have their own unique agents. So again, just as we did in the on-premises model, with one tap providing information flow to all the other tools, same in the cloud. And that's actually very interesting in the cloud, because in the cloud, a lot of these agents that you have to deploy, they take up CPU capacity that you're actually paying for. So if you can minimize the number of agents that you're deploying in this new cloud model, then you're potentially reducing the amount of processing capacity that they're going to be using, and that means that capacity can be used for applications. So that's a very important aspect of this. The second is we're enabling scale up, scale out. So Tim was talking about automation. So we think about automation in a different way at Gigamon, but we still think automation is massively important. So again, with these elastic and ephemeral workloads, you cannot be managing these using traditional techniques. You have to have very sophisticated automation that says, as these new workloads spin up, as new containers are brought into existence, or whatever the particular paradigm is, that as that happens, visibility is automatically spun up and carried with those containers for whatever the duration of their lifetime is, so that you always have visibility down to the container level. So the scale up, scale out using automation is critical. And then the final thing, smart processing of the data is very important. We knew it was important on premises, but now as we move into cloud, our customers are saying, hey, it's exactly the same deal. The more we can do to minimize the amount of traffic we have moving across the network, we have moving to our tools, the better. So our visibility model really replicates what we've been doing on premises for years with a lot of very demanding organizations, and is proving highly beneficial to our customers. So that's really the sort of main things I wanted to talk about today. Just to sort of sum up, so 3 key takeaways from the presentation, and probably none of them are news to you. So the first is that hybrid's here to stay. And with that hybrid, there is this increased complexity, and it's not going away. And it's not just you. Yes, the hybrid cloud is very complex to manage, and existing tools are often not enough. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about existing on-premise tools that were not designed for the cloud, or you're talking about cloud tools, many of which work at the logging or trace file level and don't actually get down to the level of packet level visibility or extracting metadata from that. What you really need is not one or the other. What you need is both, and you need a platform to manage both. So that really is the issue on complexity, and the second issue on addressing the merger of this cloud data with a sort of a typical on-premises visibility model to give you the complete picture, to give you the relevance and the context that you need. And then finally, our mission is around delivering this visibility solutions that organizations can up-level their capabilities. So visibility across all environments. Doesn't matter whether it's on premises, virtual, in the cloud, doesn't matter which cloud, doesn't matter whether the data is encrypted. You need visibility into all that data, and providing that really is our mission. And then secondary to that, our mission is to do that as effectively as possible. So minimize the number of agents, minimize the amount of traffic that's going to those tools, and therefore optimizing cost, which in the cloud is an increasingly big issue. You know, there's far too many organizations have moved to the cloud and then been very surprised by the costs, particularly when they have peaks. You know, they can end up buying capacity for those peaks and, you know, using it for a few weeks, but then not beyond that, but being stuck with those big bills in the long term. So optimizing the network helps you optimize costs. And that's, I think, a very big issue for all of us. So, David, that was really what I wanted to say in this short presentation. I wonder if we've got any questions or any points out there people would like to discuss.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation. We do have some questions. While we do those, I'll just bring up this slide, this poll for everyone out there in the audience. What additional info would you like about the Gigamon solution? And so let's see, Martin, first question I wanted to ask you is when you talked about, here it is, integrations, they're asking specifically around ServiceNow integration. Is that possible?
Yes, that is. Yeah, we're actually a big fan of ServiceNow. They're one of our customers. We're one of their customers. And yes, so integration with the ServiceNow data is something that we do.
Nice. And then I like this question. They say, asking for a friend. Our company just had a breach.
So, yeah, a lot of our friends have had breaches over the last little while. So I think there's really 2 levels. So at the level of prevention, there is a lot that Gigamon can do. So organizations have obviously over the last year spent a lot of time and money deploying various endpoint tools. And they've always had the back-end tools, the SIMs and those things. What they haven't really had is the ability to connect between the two. So I think we have a role in a number of areas here. So the first is figuring out what the overall landscape looks like, where the potential vulnerabilities are, where there are blind spots on the network that people might attack using whatever approach they're trying to use to breach a network and to get into the internal system. So that's one of the critical things. Second thing I'd say is in terms of detecting that information, those attacks. So in terms of detecting the attacks, we actually have got our own tool, which is called Gigamon Threat Insight, that monitors everything that's happening on the network, uses AI and machine learning to look at how what it sees developing. You know, are there particular events occurring on the network that suggest an attack is going to happen. What is the nature of that attack likely to be? And it goes beyond just using AI, because we actually have our own team of applied threat analysts who will work with you when these events start to happen to rationalize what could be taking place and to help prevent that. And then the final thing is, if a breach does take place, because we see all the traffic on the network, we can see where the initial breach took place, we can see how it spread through the network, and therefore we can help organizations contain it, and we can also help them remediate those attacks in the future. So I think we have a really big role to play in this area of breach management, albeit, we're not a sort of an edge of the enterprise tool that prevents in that sense. We're much more the holistic view of what's going on, providing the context as to what's going on and helping companies remediate that.
Very nice. Very nice. Another question I saw here, they say that they're a Gigamon customer already, but is there a cloud native version of the Gigamon product?
Yes, I saw from your survey there that we've got 11 customers who are on the webinar. And yes, so here's the answer. A little bit of a preview for our audience. On the 9th of March, Gigamon is launching a new product, which is a cloud-native product. So the real relevance of that is that for organizations that are pure play cloud organizations, all of our capabilities will be available to them. But also for those companies that are in a hybrid environment, you'll be able to use the Gigamon capabilities deployed on whatever is the most appropriate platform, or mix those platforms. So if you've got existing equipment that will coexist with everything that we're doing, obviously it has done for a while in the virtual environments like VMware, Nutanix, but now it will coexist with native cloud software that can be deployed on Amazon, on Azure, on GCP, on OCI. There's one other cloud environment I'm forgetting there, but essentially across all cloud environments. And again, it coexists. So you can choose what the right solution is for a particular network within your infrastructure, deploy on that platform to get the optimized efficiency, but share across all the different environments.
Excellent. And then another question that came in is about encrypted data. Is it possible to get visibility into encrypted payloads?
It is, and obviously that's increasingly important to many organizations. We do a lot of work in government, we do a lot of work in financial services and in healthcare, and in all these regulated environments, we've been seeing for a while what we call the sort of encryption visibility gap. So often organizations are getting 70 or 80% of the information sent to them in some encrypted format, but often they're doing encryption, for example, at firewall level, and they're therefore not able to decrypt all of the information without adversely affecting firewall performance. So our approach to decryption is a centralized approach. So because we are this abstraction layer, this fabric that sort of sits between everything, we can channel all the information through the fabric manager, understand what is decrypted, what is encrypted, how it's encrypted. We can open it up, we can look at the payloads, figure out exactly what needs to happen to it. Can it go safely to a tool? Does it need to go to multiple tools? Does it need to be quarantined? We can sort of figure out all of those things and then handle that from a single source without impacting performance of other devices on the network. So yeah, we are very much in the encryption market, and we were one of the first vendors to 1.3, TLS 1.3. So as organizations move to 1.3, we are going to be, I hope, working with them at the forefront of a lot of these encryption projects.
Very cool. Yeah, I can see what that would be always important, more so in the future. So really cool stuff, Martin. I'm afraid we're out of time in our live Q&A, but there's some more technical questions there for you in the queue. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Oh, you're welcome, David. Thanks, everybody, for your attention, and we'll get busy with those questions.
All right, and for more information on Gigamon, check out the link that's there in your audience console and contact Gigamon for a free trial to see how it can help you out with your networking and security challenges. All right, and with that, it's now time for our next prize announcement. I'll just leave up the poll for anyone out there who wants to respond to that still. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Alan Daniel from Illinois. And our next grand prize for a MacBook M1 goes to Brad Zink from Illinois as well. Congratulations. So one more grand prize and gift card to give out on the event today, so stay tuned. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter on today's Megacast. Welcome, Mr. Mark Towler, Product Marketing Manager at Progress. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I am. Am I coming through?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thanks for being on. Take it away.
My pleasure. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate everyone showing up and staying on. I know I'm near the end of the list. As I mentioned, or as was mentioned, my name is Mark Towler. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Progress. And what I want to talk to you about today is network security in 2020 and some of the lessons we learned over the last year, because it was a very exciting year, as I'm sure you'll all agree. Before I dive into that, I just want to give you an idea of who we are, and this actually makes sense because I'm going to now dive into some specific products which are applicable here. Progress is a trusted provider of the best products to develop, deploy, and manage high-impact business applications. Basically, we build the tools that people use to build apps. There's almost 2,000 companies who build their products using our products. There are hundreds of thousands of enterprises who run their mission-critical business systems through our solutions. We've got a large developer community in the millions, more millions using them regularly, and hundreds of millions of end-stage consumers who are at some level being touched by our products. So we've got fingers in a lot of pies. I am not going to bore you all by going through this modern application architecture in detail. Suffice to say, we pretty much divide our products and our capabilities into three main levels. The adaptive experience level, which is where the actual products are being built and developed. These are the actual apps that are being developed for the end users or end user applications. There's an intelligence layer, what we call a cognitive cloud layer, where there's an intelligence that goes in behind those apps, and then a connected data layer where those apps and that intelligence are able to access the data resources that they need. Now, off to the side, all of this is being monitored and quality assured through both a DevOps solution and a network monitoring and management solution. What I want to talk to you about today is one of those network monitoring and management solutions, which is WhatsUp Gold. And I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about a secure file transfer solution or a managed file transfer solution, which is MoveIt. So what are these products? WhatsUp Gold is, as I mentioned, a network monitoring solution. It's designed to make it very simple for you to see the network status, what's up, what's down. You can see where the name came from. The idea is you can monitor everything connected to your network at one time from a single, award-winning, very easy to use, very clear and intuitive interface, and you can get alerted if something goes wrong. It's basically a diagnostic solution that's making it possible for the people whose job it is to keep the network up, to see problems coming and fix them. In a nutshell, it allows you to proactively find and fix problems fast. And I really want to stress the word proactive. If any of you have ever worked with the network administrators or the systems administrators, their worst nightmare is an army of pitchfork and torch-wielding users coming and pounding on their cubicle going, why has the email server been down for 3 hours? Why haven't you done something about it? If they can fix issues before they impact the end users, it's their holy grail. WhatsUp Gold is used by anyone who has more than 3 devices networked together. We're mostly mid-market, but we can range to large enterprise and small medium business. It's very flexible, very capable. MoveIt, on the other hand, is slightly different. MoveIt is a secure and managed file transfer solution. And what it's doing is again, exactly what it says on the tin. It is allowing people to move files and folders securely, both in transit and at rest, and do it at a very, very high volume. The goal here is to secure and control transfer of critical data from systems to people, people to systems, people to people, you name it. Easy onboarding for partners and additional users, and full control over what is being seen and by whom. A big component of this is automation. We're not talking, although this is supported, about ad hoc, moving files back and forth regularly between a number of people or systems. We're talking big customers who are, in the case of a healthcare organization, sending hundreds or hundreds of thousands of files every hour between, say, a billing system and a insurance payer. This is a mission-critical solution. The big customers here, probably about 80% of our customer base for MOVEit is finance and healthcare. They are constrained by regulations. They must comply with HIPAA. They must comply with GDPR. They must comply with a variety of other regulations. And at any point, they may be called upon to be audited and prove that this particular transaction did not leak. It was seen only by these people. It got to where it went on time and under these circumstances. And all of this is effectively their money. This is how they make money, by billing customers, by moving financial data around. So it's absolutely crucial for them. Again, we're looking at slightly bigger customers, mostly in healthcare and finance. So why am I even talking about these two customers? As you saw, we've got another half dozen other products. What is it about WhatsUp Gold and MOVEit that make them relevant to our discussion here about networking security? Well, partly it's because of the way those products work, and partly because of who those customers are. We do have tens of thousands of security-focused customers who are using those systems, and they are dealing with mission-critical and business-critical processes. If the network goes down, it can cost anywhere from millions of dollars an hour to millions of dollars a minute. If the network ain't working, the business ain't working, and the money ain't flowing. Similarly, the example I used earlier of a healthcare organization, this applies to banks as well. If that flow of banking or healthcare information isn't moving, that's how they're making their money. If it stops, they've got a problem. If there's a leak or if there's a breach, that's a huge issue. And for both of these types of customers, improved access and data breaches and data leaks are a top concern. And the main reason we're talking about them instead of the others is because of the scope of their concern. They're dealing with an entire network, or at least an entire business-wide issue. The people who are developing an application have security concerns, absolutely. In fact, DevOps security is definitely a thing. The people building the databases definitely have concerns, but they aren't looking at the entire company-wide. The problem for them is significant, of course, but it's not necessarily bringing the entire business down. For both MOVEit and WhatsUp Gold, that's the scope we're working on. And because of that, we've spent a lot of time talking with our customers over the last year in 2020. And as I said, that was quite a year. I'm sure you'll agree. And we got some really valuable insights into how the security landscape has been changing for our customers and how it's going to continue to change going forward. So what did we learn? Well, for starters, everyone went home, and then everyone stayed there. COVID-19 had an absolutely earth-shaking impact on how people work. The work from home contingent of the society ballooned overnight. And we're talking extremely rapidly. This wasn't over a period of months. It was over a period of weeks, or in some cases, days. People got sent home for their safety, had to log on and continue working from home. And for the most part, that's worked. They've been able to do that. And because of that, we don't see that changing anytime soon. Put a gun to my head and ask me to guess. If we eliminated COVID tomorrow and everyone could go back to work safely, 60, 70%, depending, would never go back to the office again. And the employers are aware of that, and they're looking at all that office space that they're heating and paying for and thinking, why are we dealing with this expense? IT, of course, has had to bear the brunt of this. There were about 2 months there where they were being frantically run off their feet, supporting instead of 10, 20, maybe 30% of the employee base working remotely to 99% of them working remotely. And that meant a lot of effort looking into firewall keeping VPNs up, access control, making sure everyone has the tools they need. And it's added some major logistic issues. You can't just walk down the hall and give someone a lunar laptop when theirs isn't working. The user can't just, go to another level or go to the cafeteria if their connectivity is screwy, or, if they're at home, they have to have some way of working, because again, if they're not connected, they're not working. So IT has had an impact, and that's where What's at Gold has been relevant to looking at how this is impacting the organizations and their workforce. The other piece that's really changed is how people are working from home. There are a number of different factors that are having to be re-examined. How are files being sent back and forth? How is the workflow and the data flow working? What are the new security protocols? Does it make a difference if someone's in a secure facility that they have access with a key card and sitting behind a desk versus, as we can see here, sitting beside their bed with a toddler and when he trying to get work done? Is this all compliant with the various regulations? All of this is being re-examined, and for the most part, it works. The internet doesn't really care where you are, as long as you have access to the same materials. However, no one here is sitting at their desk for 8 hours a day and being relatively uninterrupted except by coworkers. And there's a reason I chose this picture. No matter what you're doing working from home, you're opening a door for a pet, you're dealing with a kid that needs something. I, for example, share an office space with my spouse. We're constantly moving in and out as people are taking calls or conference calls. What's going to happen here is people are going to get a little less careful. And when they need to do something in any way, they're going to reach for the most convenient solution at hand. And that may not be their laptop, and it may not be the same solution that they use when they're in the office. Often they're going to reach for a tablet or a mobile device like that, or a phone. And again, here's an example in this picture of a guy who's on the phone. We've did a survey last summer, just right at the height of the first wave of COVID, soon after the closures started. We asked a whole bunch of people in security professionals and executives in both healthcare and finance fields about how their mobile users, people using mobile devices, were able to securely and compliantly send files. What we're talking about here is what we call mobile MFT, mobile managed file transfer. Only 22% of their users can access completely the same secure file sharing systems that they use when they're in the office. And when they can't access them, they default to email, which is inherently insecure. You can't track it, you don't know who's accessed it, and that's a major issue. We found, or at least this is their self-reporting, 70% of healthcare mobile users were sending secure files through email, and it was 51% for finance. That's disturbing, and it should be. We then asked them, hey, well, can you audit all of these files that are being sent securely? 91% said they didn't think they could audit every single one of them. And yeah, I know a lot of people said they could audit most. That doesn't matter if you get audited and HIPAA comes through and says, who's seen what. 1 or 1,000 insecure items are going to be the same. It's a breach and it's an issue. So that's also something of concern. And they finally, and there's a lot more information, by the way. The full survey is available on progress.com. You can find it. And we've got a full webinar where we go into this in detail. I just wanted to highlight a few items. But the one item I wanted to highlight is we asked them, how has this changed? And again, this is only a few months into COVID. And 80% have already seen that COVID was causing an increase in people using MFT on their mobile devices. And again, it ranged for anywhere from 6 to 20%, but all of them saw an increase. And this is back in June. So it's only increased since then. And what we took away from that is there is a pressing need, not necessarily well understood, and it won't be understood yet until someone leaks something through email sent from a mobile phone, but there's a pressing need out there for a mobile version of an MFT solution if you're using an MFT solution. And if you're going to look for one, it's going to have to be something that's simple, so your end users use it. It's going to have to be familiar, ideally the same one they're using at work. Secure, of course. It must support multi-factor authentication, and I will talk more about that in a minute, but that is crucially important. And for the employer, it needs to be as inexpensive as possible, ideally free. So moving away from that for a minute, advanced, but I'm not changing. There we go. We noticed that another issue that was impacting us, and this started before COVID, but was exacerbated by it, is that equipment sourcing is becoming a lot more complicated. It should be well known that there's a lot of vendors that simply got blacklisted because where they're manufactured or the circumstances under which the governments that were involved in their manufacture rendered them inherently insecure. There are entire organizations that simply will not purchase anything from Huawei, for example. And that's an issue because a lot of these Eastern sources may very well be a security risk, but they're also where it's all being built and where it's the least expensive. And just like automobiles, it's not something where it's easy to pin down and say that was made in this country. Well, the design may have been made in North America and the software was written in India and it's gone back and forth 20 or 30 times and it was assembled finally in wherever. But it's like pointing at a Toyota and saying that's a Japanese car. Well, it was actually depended, on which model, built in Canada with capital parts from Germany or wherever. So this has been complicated to begin with. It's become more complicated. And when COVID impacted, it only made things worse. Between material shortages, concurrent to supply line shutdowns, and the fact that half the workers are sick and aren't able to come into the factory, we're seeing manufacturing slowdowns. Things that were reliably, order from DHL and it's there in a couple of days, you may have to wait, or it may not be available at all, or maybe they're not making anymore. Add in various turn in governments. It's been politically exciting in 2020 to say the least. Add Brexit into the matter, and I'm not sure anyone can tell you what's required and how long it would take to import network gear into the UK, period. And it's going to change. No one knows. As for the U.S., I'm just going to say January 6th of this year probably did not increase the confidence and the stability of the political process or marketplaces anywhere in the U.S. or the rest of North America. All of this is having an impact on where people can look to purchase equipment, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take to get it, and a number of other factors. Our overall advice for this, and because again, we don't have a magic wand or solution, this is what we're hearing from our customers. If you need a particular type of network gear, stock up now, because you don't want to be suddenly mixing and matching access points and using Meraki for an existing system and trying to shoehorn something else in alongside it. That causes additional complexity. It's not what you want. This one I'm going to go over fairly lightly because this one isn't exactly new. It's an ongoing issue that our customers have been talking about, and it's something we're trying to do as well. As I said, we have some very conservative customers, especially on the MFT side. The financial realities and advantages of the cloud are just too appealing. These people inherently distrust something with someone else's computer, but they're being forced to move business processes, data, applications, everything onto the cloud. And this is nothing new. Everyone else has been doing it. In fact, they're at the tail end of the cloud revolution. The problem with this is that this has just made the cloud one big target. There are reasons why it's both more and less secure, but for the biggest part, we're just seeing more attacks and more intrusion attempts and more concern around what's going on in the cloud in terms of security. More backdoors, more ransomware, more malware, and it's all becoming more prevalent as more and more important and valuable stuff worth stealing ends up on the cloud. One thing that's important is that if you read the fine print, most cloud providers are not taking any significant responsibility for your data security. You can spin up a server and the security around it and who has access is totally up to you. And that's very different if that's a secure data center that you've got locked in your basement behind, multiple key card entries and, something that's being run on a cloud somewhere in, where is your local cloud service provider? It's something that people are thinking of, and it's something that's playing a factor. It's, again, something that's not going to change. We're still seeing growth. In fact, our Move It Cloud solution is our fastest growing Move It solution. But we are focusing a lot more on security and reliability and making sure that that solution is certified, so it's meeting the needs of our customers. It's a big pressing concern. It's only going to get worse. And there were no other actual major security issues at all in 2020, I'm glad to say. Nothing earth-shattering or tremendously important. All right, who are we kidding? That joke works better in a live setting where I can actually see people react. But the SolarWinds hack and other cybercrime was absolutely dinosaur killing extinction level impact on the security industry and the networking industry overall. This was an incredibly sophisticated and incredibly effective hack. The way it was executed means no one really is immune to this sort of thing. A little bit of background for those who aren't familiar, but some bad actor, probably it's suspected, backed by a nation state, was able to gain access to the development environment of SolarWinds and was able to not only inject malware into their in-development code, but also completely cover their tracks and remove any trace of their existence, alter the logs so that code injection was not noticed and not detectable. And then SolarWinds completed their build, rolled that out to their customers, who of course updated to the latest security fix. And now the entire Fortune 500 and huge chunks of the government have backdoors. And it was discovered honestly by accident. In fact, here's another example of MFA. I believe a company called FireEye had an issue where one of their employees failed a multi-factor authentication check from their phone, and they took the due diligence of not only investigating and not just ignoring what could have been a false negative, but actually diving right into the code to determine where the issue was, and they're the ones who found it and sounded the alarm. This has shaken the entire intrusion community to its core. You do not expect your vendor, especially one as large and with presumably effective DevOps security, to introduce malware as part of an update. People install updates for security purposes to make sure they are preventing the latest zero-day exploits. What's happening with this is that everyone is reevaluating their security processes and practices, and it's not just intrusion. They're looking at beefing up how they can figure out how to not just stop other people from accessing the network, but how they can confirm that what they're deliberately putting on their network is actually something that's going to be safe. One solution that's being looked at is the ability to encrypt everything on your network. And I think Martin from GigaOM mentioned this as well. You can run a lot of Windows servers in FIPS encryption mode. There's a lot of ways to encrypt your network so that everything that's being sent back and forth is encrypted and the data that's on that server is encrypted. It doesn't mean that that's impenetrable. Someone can always get the encryption keys, but it doesn't mean if someone's able to access your network, they can't necessarily see what's going on in that network. And they can see the server, but they don't necessarily have any value. There's no value in what's on it because it's all completely encrypted. We're seeing in a lot of cases that's something that people are looking at as an option. And it does increase CPU usage, and it does cause performance hit. But the SolarWinds hack has scared a lot of people and made them realize this is absolutely crucial. Another similar solution involving here is your MFT solution. By nature, a secure file transfer or a managed file transfer solution is securely transferring information back and forth. It is encrypting everything all along the way. It should be encrypting that data while it's both in transit and at rest. It's probably the most secure system within your network right now. And also by its nature, it's designed to ingest and take information from other systems and transfer them. So of course you're using it for your billing or your patient records. There's no reason you can't put your email on it as well, or Salesforce, or anything else that's sensitive. Again, if it's what's encrypted can be broken into, especially if you can get the keys, but this does give another extra layer of security. If, for example, your network monitoring solution gets hacked, well, it can tell you where the traffic is, how big the traffic is, what processor load is, all the other important stuff, but it doesn't need to know what that data is that's being transferred back and forth. And it doesn't need to know what's on those servers that it's monitoring. So adding this whole second level of encryption is not a panacea. It's not going to fix everything, but it is going to put a second line of security in place. And we're looking at a lot of our customers who are doing exactly that. How can I encrypt my entire network? And if I do, can I still monitor it? How can I get more systems onto my existing MFT because I got it and it's relatively inexpensive? So with that, I'm just going to cover up some of the key learnings, just a quick review. This is kind of what we took out of all of this. First off, embrace that new work from home reality. It's what it is. It's not going to change. Your IT organization that supports your home workers is just going to have to be reorganized in order to deal with it. And they probably already have been. We found that for a lot of our customers, it was a tense or exciting couple of weeks, a couple of months, but it immediately got back to normal and they're doing fine. So that may have already been taken care of. If you've got managed file transfer, a secure file transfer system, enable whatever mobile options there are. If it doesn't have a mobile option, look for one that does. You have people at home. They are going to reach for their phone if it's more convenient, period. You don't have as much control over them. You can't lock the phones at the door. They're not behind a secure facility where they had to key card their way in or their security at the door. They leave things open. It's something that's absolutely essential because they will start leaking things through email. We know it. Get the network gear that you need now. We may actually be past some of this. We're going to see how things ramp up, but the economic future is still quite uncertain. While networking has been somewhat inured from the economic downturn caused by COVID, it's not immune. And we're going to see a lot of organizations that either are acquired or are no longer in business. Encrypt everything, both in the cloud and on premises. And I want to make a special note of that about on cloud. Cloud systems will often, in some cases, encrypt things for you. There's no reason you can't add a second layer of encryption. For example, we support with our Move It solution, Microsoft's Azure Blob storage capability. Anything you put into an Azure Blob is automatically encrypted by Microsoft, and that's not something you can turn off. Some of our customers actually don't like that, and we've included the ability for them to turn off the corresponding Move It encryption so that they aren't double encrypting everything, and that was a concern because that's a processor hit and a transaction hit. And remember when I said we're talking hundreds of thousands of transactions an hour, if you have to encrypt and decrypt things twice, you're spending a lot more cycles on that sort of thing, both in time and in the CPU. The other piece of that is encrypt data in transit and at rest. And I mentioned that in passing, but it's crucially important to encrypt your data that is at rest. Not all MFTs do it. Most of them support it, but they don't always include it, and you may have to pay extra for it. It may not be turned on, and you may not realize that. It is, again, vitally important. It doesn't matter if it's moving from place to place and no one can hack it. If they can get into your network and access that server, they've got the keys to the kingdom. And finally, and if you take nothing else from my presentation, please, please, please enable MFA. I could do an entire webinar. In fact, I think I have in the past somewhere, but multi-factor authentication is the one thing that will protect you. Your password is effectively worthless. I linked to a blog there that talks about how this works, and it references a very detailed study done by the Microsoft Azure counter-intrusion team. They get hacked literally hacking attempts millions of times a day, and they have an incredibly detailed rundown on all the different types of hacks, whether or not a password would have mattered, whether or not the password was available and that's how they're hacking, whether or not the password was guessed. At the end of the day, the one thing that stops 99.9% of them is multi-factor authentication, which, by the way, I'm sorry if you're not familiar with it. Multi-factor authentication is something you know and something you have. I know my password, and I have a phone with an app or a keychain to which a secondary one-time password can be sent or retrieved. And the combination of the two, it proves that you are who you claim to be. That's absolutely vital because someone gets your password, they've got the keys to the kingdom. With multi-factor authentication, they don't. And that's kind of what we learned. I'll take some questions now, but hopefully I haven't run over time, but I just want to let you know, thank you very much. If you have additional questions, submit them, and I'll see what I can do to answer them.
Excellent presentation, Mark. Thank you so much. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there that says, do you want to learn more about Move It or What's Up Gold? And feel free to select the option on there that corresponds to you. So lots of questions coming in. First one, I guess I'll go to this one. They're asking, do you manage file transfers between different cloud providers?
Absolutely. We don't really care where the data is. We can move it back and forth.
Okay.
That may have been an overly simplistic answer, but we literally do not care. Wherever your data is, we can track it and we can keep it safe and we can securely move it from one place to another.
Okay, perfect. And then another question Charlie's asking in regards to FTP, he says their company has a large shared multi-layer files that are created with AutoCAD. It's large in file size. Could MoveIt handle that type of large file or size of file?
Yes, it can. There is a maximum point where it becomes cumbersome due to transmission times and error checking. Generally, I want to say it's in the gigabyte range. If it's more than 5 gigabytes, it will do it, but it will be slow, and you're going to have some error checking issues. Generally, we recommend something smaller. The vast majority of files that are transferred are less than 100 megabytes or less than a gig. 500 megabytes is kind of the regular upper limit. MoveIt's designed to move a lot of files securely and quickly and automatically. The really big ones, there's a technology that's often known as accelerated or extreme file transfer, and there are organizations that specialize in it, and that's where they start dealing with multi-gig issues. I noticed someone else asked about Signius somewhere else in there. We actually partnered with them briefly at a time. And the discrepancy was, we'll send a lot of files everywhere very fast, but if you have 200 or 300 gigabytes of data that you need to move across really huge distances, and the example, frankly, was they were using high-res video that was being sent from Hollywood down to New Zealand to get special effects added at the Weta workshops and then sent back. That's what they specialized in, and they were literally moving hundreds of thousands of gigabits securely. It's a different architecture and not really what MoveIt is optimized for. But depending on the size of your FTP files, yeah, it shouldn't be an issue.
Excellent. Another question they're asking if MoveIt is compliant with IRS standards for accounting firms for file transfer. Not sure if you know on that offhand.
I don't want to give a blanket yes, but we are compliant with a variety of regulatory requirements like PCI, DSS, and GDPR and HIPAA. The issue here becomes a question of how much compliance are you looking for. The security level and the encryption levels all meet government standards. We have a lot of government, and I mean like military and law enforcement. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention whether or not the FBI is a customer, but we're talking about the high security issues that are using high security requirements for MoveIt. The challenge is going to be, if you've got a particular regulation you need to be compliant with, how much of that is dependent upon your file transfer solution. For example, I mentioned PCI, that's the credit card security compliance requirement. There are, I think off the top of my head, there are 12 different areas that you're required to meet certain standards. 4 of them have to do with point of sale or systems or actual security of the physical location wherein the data resides. We obviously have no control over it. We're going to move that information from place to place, and we'll keep it secure while it's moving and where it's resting, and we'll keep track of every single bit of it and give you a complete audit trail and a tamper-evident audit trail I can mention as well. So you'll know if something's gone wrong or if something's been accessed, and you'll know why. We can't control the point of sale, of course. So that's just an example, but we've had the same issue, for example, with GDPR. One of the requirements of GDPR is that you erase the information requested by a EU citizen, and you certainly can. But that's something that you have to do. We don't provide any special capability for doing that. You've got to go ahead and find it yourself. For other provisions, for example, all that data needs to be stored within the EU. We specifically set up data centers, or I should say a cloud implementation in Germany, specifically to support that requirement. And we are certified for HIPAA and GDPR, meaning that it's going to be a lot easier to fill your certifications for those. If you've got questions about that and the specifics, I really strongly recommend you get in touch with one of our salespeople, because they will get you in touch with a product expert and the appropriate don't want to promise that we can make you compliant because, like I said, there are certain aspects of various regulations that are outside of our control. But for everything else, short answer, yes.
Excellent. Yeah, lots of good questions coming in. Another question I want to ask you here. They say, can hacks like the SolarWinds attack you talked about, do you think it's possible to actually prevent those?
Oh, man. Look at the raging debate on that subject in the security field for the last 4 months. In theory, yes. For the vast majority of people who are trying not to get hacked, not really. Here's the dirty little secret. The level of sophistication, and frankly, this is what the level of sophistication and the amount of time and effort and expense it took is what's suggesting that this was a nation-state-backed hack. The level of sophistication is such that even the best DevOps security and the best counter-intrusion measures may not have stopped it. There's one of those whole setups of how secure do you have to be before you're spending more on security than you're making on the product. It's possible, but I mean, I've even seen quotes from security experts saying you can't expect a private organization, even one as big as SolarWinds or Microsoft or Google, to be able to deal with the resources an entire nation state can bring to bear. No one is 100% secure. We have nothing but sympathy for SolarWinds and for the people impacted by the hack. Any software vendor could have been vulnerable to the exact same thing. It's a major issue, and there are people who have much better security knowledge and much more expertise in the field are currently debating that point right now. So my short answer is not any time in a hurry. That's why I've been talking about mitigation and assume that if someone does break in, how do you limit their access and how can you limit what they can get their hands on? There may be a solution, but I think we're looking at months from now before anyone's got some good proposals.
Excellent. And then when it comes to trying out a MOVEit or a WhatsUp, what do you recommend? What's the first step for folks who haven't used these before, they want to get started?
WhatsUp Gold's really, really easy. Go to whatsupgold.com and you'll see a big button on every single page that says free trial. You can download a free trial, you can install it, and you can be up and operating on your network and getting actionable information within about 30 minutes. It's very, very simple. MOVEit's a little bit more of a challenge because, well, you can, depending on where you are in the world, download a trial and set it up. It's a little bit more complicated to set it up. And unlike WhatsUp Gold, which can immediately go out and find everything in your network, you have to tell MOVEit what you want to move and connect it to various sources. What we recommend for MOVEit, especially within North America, is get in touch. And I know no one wants to talk to people, but if you get in touch with our sales team, and again, we've got a big, free demo button all over Ipswitch.com, which is the former owner of MOVEit. We're still integrating the website. But you go to progress.com, look for MOVEit. Anywhere you click on there, we can set you up with someone who can not only give you a very quick, very simple demo, but answer your questions directly. MOVEit's just a bit more complicated, as you saw with my earlier question. Giving it to you isn't going to answer most of the questions. You can set it up, you can look at it, but if you don't know how to use it or you're not sure what to test, it's not going to help. We've got sales engineers who can, in very short time, sit down and explain exactly what it can do and what it can do for you. We've got customers who've been long-term customers. Both of these products are well established with large customer bases. And I can remember I talked to one a year or two ago at a trade show, remember those, where I pointed out that he was saying he really wanted to extend that MOVEit functionality to his end users. And I said, well, you can use the ad hoc that allows people to send MOVEit secure files as easily as they send email. And he said, well, what? So again, there's a lot of capabilities that we don't expect everyone to know. We breathe this stuff every day. It's not top of mind for anyone else. So we may be able to have a better solution or a simpler solution rather than you just downloading it and showing it. It's a long answer, but WhatsUp Gold, really easy. Download a trial, play with it. It's fun. If you just want to see it too, in fact, if you go to whatsupgold.com, there's a link right there to a live demo. It's a read-only, so you can't change anything, but you get to play with it right there on the web. The What's Up Gold interface is all web-oriented or completely web-based, so you can try it out, look at it, see what it looks like. You can't change anything, and there's some other functions that won't work, but you can try it before you download it and give it a shot.
Awesome. All right. Well, really excellent presentation. I'm afraid we're out of time. We've got a number of more technical questions we'll route over to you, Mark. So we appreciate your help with those. Thank you so much for your great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, if you have any questions, wanderbyprogress.com or whatsupgold.com, and we'll be more than happy to help you out.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark, and thank you to Progress Software. For more information, of course, check out the link that's there in your audience console in the Handouts tab. And with that, it's time for our final prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Dennis Ott from California. And our final grand prize for a MacBook M1 is going to Guy Larkin from California as well. Congratulations to all the prize winners on the event today. I will post all the winners' names there in the questions tab. Doing that right now. And before you go, I want to remind you to check out all the social media channels provided by Actual Tech Media, the 10 on Tech podcast, our LinkedIn channel, YouTube, Twitter. All the links are there in your audience console. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to chat with you. I hope to see you on our upcoming Megacast on creating and implementing a data protection strategy and disaster recovery plan happening next week. We'll see you there. Hope you enjoyed the event, and have a great day. Bye-bye.